Welcome in. It is week 8 in the NFL season, actually just past week 8 of the NFL season. My name is Joe, better known as NFLosophy. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to our week 8 recap show. Super excited about this one. We have some bad losses this week. Some not losses on our picks, but losses on some of the other and just some of the games. Like there are some games this week that did not turn out the way that I thought they were going to turn out, and quite disappointing because of that. So I overall picks last week did went really well. Actually, I think we ended up 8-6. Kind of mad that we ended up 8-6. Should have been 9-6. The problem is that at 8-6, we also had our Rams minus 16, which I'm kind of mad about. Our Rams minus 16 missed because the Texans decided to drop. Actually, it wasn't the Texans. It was the Rams decided to kind of hit the showers at the end of the third quarter after being up. What was it, 33-0? Yeah, I think it was 33-0. And then they decided to hit the showers and allow the Texans to drop 22 unanswered in the fourth quarter. And it ends up closing out, I forget what it was, the specifics. But anyways, the Texans basically come back and get to minus 16 for the push. So really it's 8-6-1 for the week when it should have been a 9-6-1. By the way, we actually chose this game on Thursday night, and we chose it at like 14.5 or something like that. So it should really count. So we should really be 9-6-1 or 9-6 instead of which gives us the 60%, which is what you always want to hit, right? Whenever you're betting, that's the goal, is to hit. If you're hitting 60%, you're doing well. But yeah, it just did not turn out the way that we wanted in that particular game. And only a few other games didn't turn out the way that we wanted. So overall, great week last week. Super interesting week in terms of games and stuff that we saw and some things that we figured out. And I think the week is, or the season is now coming in. I mean, I can't believe it's almost halfway through the games coming up in week 9. We will be halfway through the season. So I don't know what particular game that is. There's once the 1 o'clock game, so at some point through the 1 o'clock game. So call it like, I don't know, like 3 o'clock, maybe like 2:30, 3 o'clock Eastern time on Sunday, we will be halfway through the season. So let's just consider it halfway through the season at this point. So for tonight, we've got a really good show for you. We're going to fly through these faster than we've ever done. Going to be super, super quick. I know people probably have the World Series on in the background, got a lot of other stuff going on, on a Tuesday night. One other programming note. So the weekly preview show will be moving from Thursday to Wednesday this week. So tomorrow night I'll be on for the preview show. The reason for that is this weekend is the baby shower, actually. So got a lot to do before the weekend gets here, and happy wife equals happy life. And so I got to move that up so we can get some more stuff done on Thursday and Friday before that happens. So welcome in. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and let's get to it. Let's go ahead and actually start getting into these games. We'll go through all of the games just in order, unless somebody wants to talk about something specific while they're here. And if not, then throw some questions, comments in the chat, and we'll go through them all. So let's start with Green Bay, Arizona. So this is a Thursday night game. We talked about this one a little bit on our pregame show, right? So we had our preview show last week on Thursday. We talked about exactly what was going to happen. It turned out very, very close to what we said was going to happen. Gabe, welcome in. Did you talk about rug stuff yet? You know what? Actually, that's not a bad idea. We should probably hit a few notes before we get through. So we'll talk about the trade deadline a little bit. Hodzi, welcome in. Hodzi 87. Arizona needs to play from the lead. Yeah, that's actually one of the points I'm going to hit on that particular game. So let's get through a couple bits of news, right? So let's talk about the bad and the ugly first, right? So Henry Ruggs is going to be charged with drunken manslaughter, basically, which is, I think, the second. It's a felony of the second highest degree in Nevada. Apparently, late last night he was under the influence of something. They haven't said what. crashed into the back of a RAV4. The RAV4 was on fire whenever first responders got there. They ended up pulling a victim from the car who had already passed away. And Henry Ruggs, he didn't leave the scene, for at least give him a little bit of credit. He was still there. He called 911, like he did what he was supposed to do after the fact. But bad decisions leading up to that cost somebody their life, and that's absolutely tragic. Now, um, there have been a few incidences of this in the past, and the main one that feels relevant here is the Dante Stallworth incident. There was Brent from the Cowboys, but that was another player that was in the car with him, and the other player in the car passed away. And then who was the other one? There was one more that was relevant, but for me, it's the Dante Stallworth one. So Stallworth, drinking and driving, manslaughter. The victim, Dante Stallworth was actually only given 30 days in prison for his incident. And that feels obviously very low for somebody's life. It doesn't feel like enough, but there are apparently instances where, and this appears to be fairly common. I'm no legal expert, but I remember reading a story that talked about basically about how Dante Stallworth got off easy because he was rich and wealthy and was able to financially compensate the family, and that helped the judge lower his actual criminal charges, right? So you have a civil suit and criminal charges. Those are two different things. Civil suit is, you've caused me pain and undue damage and stress and financial damages from this particular situation for something that you did, and I'm suing you for money because of that. Criminal charges are brought by the government, by the state, the city, whoever it might be. And that's what ends up resulting in jail time. So he settled his civil suit, Stallworth did, in that particular instance, and the criminal charges were apparently lessened in alignment with that. Maybe not specifically due to that, but in alignment with that. So he basically got the least amount that he could do. He said that he showed remorse, all kinds of stuff. So in this situation, Ruggs seems like he's in a really bad spot because there's basically no way around this. Now, I was trying to look it up, and they said that there was something that that with the Stallworth case, they weren't totally sure that they were going to be able to prove it, which is why they allowed him to plead down to 30 days in prison, which I think was actually time served by that point. And then for the Ruggs case, there's no telling. So it's supposedly a two-year minimum, maximum of 20 years for a second degree felony in Vegas. So really, really unfortunate, awful situation. He made a bad choice, and I'm sure he feels awful about it now. I don't have any prophetic takes on the situation. My thing is seeing friends go through it, and going through college myself and drinking a ton. Alcohol it inhibits your ability to make decisions, and that's why people tend to love alcohol, right? Is because it allows you to take down your walls and do things that you wouldn't otherwise do, and live outside your boundaries for a little bit, and that's exciting to people, but it also inhibits your decision making. And I learned way back, a while back, that the best thing for me or any of my friends to do is just, if we know we're going to be drinking, take a ride there, take a cab there, take an Uber there, whatever it may be, just go there without your car. And then that way, no matter what happens, you can't make a bad decision at the end of the night, because if you've ever been out drinking, you've probably been in a situation where you said, "Oh, I'm okay, I can drive," but the reality is even after two or three, you are impaired, both physically and by the law, right? Both actually and according to the law, you are impaired. So best thing I can say is just don't put yourself in that situation. And that's what players were always taught too, right? So every year there's the rookie symposium. Dante Stallworth actually spoke at the rookie symposium. I think they've changed it now. It's the rookie something or other. That's run by the operations, and it's done. Each individual team has to do one themselves. We did one with the Bucks with our rookies. We even did it for local high school athletes, but it's basically like, hey, this, don't put yourself in these situations. You're out drinking, girl wants to go do something. It's you two are by yourself. She can walk out of a room and say anything she wants. And you could end up being put in a particular position. And whether you did something wrong or not, it doesn't really matter if you put yourself in that position. So just don't put yourself in that position. It was great because, our coaching staff, even did some role playing for a lot of our high schools in the area, and basically taught high schooler players like, hey, like, a girl comes to talk to you and you leave a party together, and anything that happens without people seeing, there's just no telling, right? And you've got to, it was really interesting the way they kind of put on the skits and sketches and stuff like that, but it was really enlightening for a lot of these players, and hopefully pretty impactful. But obviously the message didn't seem to get through to Ruggs, because he would have had to have gone through it. It's just really, really sad. So hopefully, hopefully it's a situation where he and others can learn from it by not making the same mistake. So we got that. Let's not great, not a great vibe to start on. But what we can do is we can actually move along to the trade deadline. So biggest deal of the day is the one that didn't happen. So Deshaun Watson ends up not going anywhere. It's almost like we know what we're talking about around here. So as we've been saying since September, there's no shot that this happens. And everybody can talk about, hey, it was close. It was close. It was only one thing, or this thing, or with this team, it was this, and with this team, it was this, and it almost happened. The reality is there were always just too many hurdles in the way. And you can say it was this hurdle or that hurdle, but it was just one too many to clear in every situation. And that was the issue, is that until those legal problems are solved, it was going to be a major hurdle. I mean, it's a freaking pole vault over that bar, not just a hurdle, right? So for me, it just never seemed probable, nor really even all that possible. With the legal situation, how do you trade for a guy like that that's facing all of those charges against him? It's kind of like, in the middle of the Me Too movement, how do you hire somebody like Kevin Spacey? How do you work with the heads of these studios? How do you do that, right? Like it's not a good look for anybody that takes that on. I'm surprised that the Dolphins even let it be known that they were involved in the situation. And then they ended up not making a move. And that just always felt like it was going to be the case to me. Hodsy, Texans wanted the world for a player who might not step foot on the football field again. But yeah, he isn't going anywhere until the legal. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Is the Texans. Here's the thing. If teams would be willing, it's all this makes it very this may seem very cold, but it's all a math problem for teams, right? And whether they recognize this or not, it's what they're trying to balance in the entire equation is how much risk am I taking on, and what's the reward that I'm going to get out of it, right? So if I take on Deshaun Watson, I'm going to get, I'm probably going to be known in the national news as the team or the owner who traded for a guy who has 22 or some odd allegations of sexual assault. And I'm going to be that and have to deal with all of that. But on top of that, I may not have him for 6 months, a year, 2 years, potentially, depending on what the NFL decides to do. And at the end of it, I'm going to have to give up 3 first-round picks and 2 second rounds as well. I'm basically going to have to mortgage my entire future to do that. And I say owner because an owner has to make that decision. A GM isn't going to trade 3 unless he has just the most incredible job security on the face of the planet. So we're talking maybe Bill Belichick. And even at this point, I don't know that he has that type of job security. As a GM, I don't know that anybody has that type of job security. And the ones that do don't need a quarterback. So anybody that's willing to trade that much probably wasn't going to get what they wanted out of that situation, or wasn't going to be around long enough to see the fruits of their labor because they were going to have to pay too much. And you're right, Hodsy. It's what's the cost of that risk versus what's the rewards and benefits, and how long is it going to take to be able to play out for you? And it just the equation it just never seemed to line up for any single team. And I know that there were reports that the Dolphins and Texans had a deal in place, and it's kind of like the reports of the NFL is saying that basically if Watson were to get traded, then he would be allowed to play because they don't have enough information. And I'm calling bullshit. They know the NFL's not making a decision because they don't have to. The NFL has plenty of information, and they can go to those witnesses. There were Sports Illustrated reports where they just went and talked to a couple of the women who have allegations against Deshaun Watson, and they said, "Yeah, here's my story. And oh, by the way, here's some evidence. Here's text messages, here's Facebook messages, here's pictures that he sent me," like those type of things. And you have 22 of these, and they all are saying the same thing, but separately. It's not like, yeah, at some point there might be piling on, but it's not like these just kind of came out of nowhere and everybody just coincidentally, there's 22 people that all have the same story. No, these were all things that were filed separately. So it just never made sense. It was something that I've been on about since the beginning of the season, and I got frustrated because all of the reports are like, "Oh, it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen," and it's just it creates turmoil and chaos and stuff to write about, and it just the reality is it probably was never going to happen. Now, and the other thing about this, and we haven't talked about this much, like if you're the Texans and you say, "Hey, I think I could get 3 first rounders and 2 second rounders out of this," and teams are coming in and saying, "Hey, like I'll give you a first rounder and a couple of second rounders and maybe make one of them a conditional pick that's a first rounder if he gets to play." Now, if they say, "Hey, that's way off from what we want," if the Texans said that, then like you have to understand that they're probably not willing to make that bend now. Now they may be willing to be able to make a little bit of a compromise later on in the offseason, because that's when all of these cases should either be settled or something should be done, or the court process has moved along or whatever it might be, right? But if the court cases get settled, now all of a sudden Deshaun Watson, you have a little bit of clarity on the situation, and now you know that what you're asking for or what teams are offering are things that are in line with when he's going to be able to play. And at come draft time, we're gonna have a lot better picture, and I think that's going to be important in that situation. Hodzi, like people are going to be willing to throw a third round pick for that risk reward scenario, but you're not going to send multiple ones for that. Exactly, exactly. And Hodzi, they'd even probably be willing to throw a one, possibly even two firsts, because the reality is Deshaun Watson, while he wasn't getting traded, the reality is that if he were traded for, he probably doesn't play this year, but he at least gets his suspension started and part of that out of the way, or at least gets put on the exempt list, where when he does get suspended, those games that he misses counts towards his suspension. Now all of a sudden you've got him in a situation where you potentially get him back middle of next year, or even maybe start of next year, depending on what the suspension ends up being. It also incentivizes him to settle those cases and make them go away. So Texans needed to move on from Watson. Yeah, honestly, at this point, and here's the thing, they probably had a better opportunity to move him prior to the season, and they stood firm. And this is if you're asking me what I think happened in the Texans building, I think they came in and said, "Man, we really want Deshaun to play." With Nick Caserio in there and David Coley and Jack Easterby, like they came in and said, "Hey, we think we can work this and we can move it around and make it work." And then they realized, "Hey, it's not going to work." And then by the time they realized that it wasn't going to work, it was probably a little bit too late for them to really get other teams involved in the process of okay, Deshaun's now on the trade block. Do you guys want to come make offers? And they didn't really get the offers that they were wanting to the level that they were wanting. Plus, these allegations are already floating around, and by then the trade value started to decline, and they held their ground and said, "Hey, you know what? We're just not going to trade him." Now they're in the middle of the season. They're losing. They're paying Watson salary to basically sit on the bench or not even show up on Sundays, and they're paying millions of dollars for him not to play. and they have been trying to push teams and leak reports to get him to get some sort of trade value out of him. And it was just never going to happen. They were always asking too much, and that's what we said. The ask, they viewed him in this way, like way up here, right? And other teams said no. Like the Texans viewed Deshaun Watson as he's a premier player, talented at the premier position. He's young. He's on a solid contract for his age. You're getting this fantastic quarterback that typically would rank up here. For everybody else, they're like, we're getting a guy that has 22 sexual assault allegations. We're going to catch some PR heat, and we don't know when we're actually going to be able to get him on the field. So we're probably not going to get him until next year or halfway through next year. And those two things were too far apart for people to come to terms on. I put it on Twitter. It's basically like if I say my house is worth $1 million, and you're like, well, the appraiser said it's actually worth 100,000. I said, no, I think it's worth $1 million right now. You pay me $1 million, and you're like, yeah, I'll give you 100,000. And I'm like, nope, it's $1 million. It's $1 million or nothing. That's not negotiating. That's just me being an idiot, basically, right? And that's kind of what happened with the Texans and Deshaun Watson. So he ends up not getting traded. Glad that story's over. We can wipe the slate clean. It'll be brought up at some point throughout the rest of the year when people are talking about, oh, well, come draft time and teams that need quarterbacks, because there's a bunch of teams that are going to need quarterbacks after this season. Von Miller ends up going to the Rams. Let's see. I want to make sure I get all of these. So Von Miller ends up going to the Rams. Let me see. Trade deadline. Deshaun Jackson doesn't go anywhere, ends up getting waived. Let's see. Chiefs trade DuVernay Tardif to the Jets. Jalen Smith gets cut. Steelers trade Ingram to the Chiefs, which I think is probably the biggest move of the day. And the reason I say that is, for whatever reason, the Steelers decided that Ingram was an off-ball linebacker and wanted to continue to drop him into coverage, and the Chiefs are going to use him on the edge. And the other thing is, we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to the Kansas City New York Giants game. They tested out early on moving, and we've talked about this on the stream prior. They've tested out moving Chris Jones out to the edge and getting him to rush from the edge, and it just hasn't worked. And they've slowly been kind of moving him back inside and moving him around the last couple of games. Now he gets back to the inside now that Ingram's here, probably. And I think it helps that defense. Now, if they could have landed a good cornerback, that would have been even more impactful. But I'll take the pass rush. Definitely going to help having Ingram on that team. So that's probably the biggest deal of the day for me. Pretty much nothing else came to fruition. None of the running backs moved. None of the no major wide receivers. Odell Beckham doesn't go anywhere. So yeah. I think it's interesting. I think all the big trades actually happened well before. Omeniu goes to the 49ers. Forgot about that one. Ingram to the Saints was a few days ago. Flacco to the Jets, of course, was a few days ago. But nothing crazy over the last 24 hours. Hodzi, obviously it's different decision makers, but trying to reconcile the Hopkins deal to what they want for Watson in this current situation is, nothing about that front office for Houston right now makes any sense. Nothing that Houston is doing is making any sense. And it's weird because the whole, anytime anybody leaves New England, everything ends up going wrong for them. It's pretty much just been this trend of whatever Belichick does in New England, it does not translate elsewhere. It must all be Belichick, because it doesn't matter if it's McDaniels or Flores or Lombardi or any of those guys that leave. Caserio, Bill O'Brien, all of these guys, Romeo Crennel, who are potential Hall of Famers in their own right for different reasons. When they leave New England, it just doesn't work out. So at some point you notice a trend there and you stop hiring New England people. So we'll see how that turns out, but I have no faith. I have no faith in the Texans at this point. And right now it feels like they've dug themselves such a large hole. I mean, they didn't have any draft picks last year. The cap's not particularly great. it's gotten bad, and this is going to be a year or two for them, not just this year but next year, to turn around too. Like, it feels like they've dug themselves in an even deeper hole while being at the bottom this year. So we'll see how that goes with the Texans, but I'm not particularly optimistic about them. So all right, so that's news for the day, news for the week. There was a lot to go on. All right, let's jump into the games. Let's get in. So we're starting Green Bay, Arizona. So we talked about this last week and on the pregame show. We've covered it a bit already, but I think we can hit the highlights and discuss one more element to the game that I think is important to cover. So Green Bay came into this game and they ended up being exactly who we thought they were. And when I say we, I mean this community in particular, because everybody else said, how in the world can the Cardinals lose to a team like Green Bay, who's missing Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard because they're on COVID? They've got injuries. They don't have Jair Alexander to injury, their best cornerback. Like, how in the world are the Packers going to be able to beat them? And we said, well, they're going to beat them exactly like this. They're going to control the clock, which they did. They're going to run the ball. They're going to throw a bunch of screens. They're going to take their shots downfield. And then their defense is going to play too deep, and they're going to keep you from creating big plays. And that's exactly what they did. And they did a fairly solid job all around. Now, at the end of the game, obviously Arizona still had a chance to win it. The issue is that if AJ, and this is the element that I want to talk about, if AJ Green catches that ball, it changes the entire narrative about the Cardinals right now, right? And we can say this not just about this game, but if you go back to a previous week, whenever the Cardinals played Minnesota, if Minnesota hits a field goal against the Cardinals, the narrative about the Vikings and the narrative about the Cardinals look very, very different right now. Because if Minnesota hits that field goal, then we're talking about a 6-1 Vikings team coming into this game, not an undefeated, or I'm sorry, a 6-1 Arizona team coming into this game, not a 7-0 Arizona team and an undefeated one. Skinny Maine, thank you so much for the prime. Welcome in. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So we have to talk about the narrative and how teams are viewed going into different ones. Hodzi, thank you so much for the follow. Appreciate it. The Cardinals are still good. Yeah. I mean, the Cardinals are definitely good. Just one loss isn't going to change that. So for me, it's important to call those things out and see them for face value, because we called this game. We called it pretty specifically coming into this. Like, with Aaron Rodgers and a good kicker, they're going to be just fine. And they play, and Green Bay plays in phase with all three of the different parts of the team in terms of offense, defense, and special teams. They play as in phase as any and in conjunction as any team in the NFL. And that's what's got them playing. Their defense still isn't that good. They're a mediocre defense, but they're protected pretty well by an offense that's able to control the ball through a short passing game, and through runs and screens. And so good for them. Good on them. They absolutely deserve to win that game. However, if AJ Green gets the check at the end of the game and understands that he's about to get a back shoulder throw and looks for the football, Arizona is still undefeated. But should Arizona still be undefeated at this point? Probably not, because Minnesota missed a short field goal. So again, it's hard to maintain context with as many football games play in, but it's also interesting because the further you get away from games, the easier it is to forget. At some point, people are going to go, wow, the Titans lost to the Jets. And you realize, well, the Titans didn't have Julio Jones, nor did they have AJ Brown for that particular game. So like those things matter. We'll always try to call out that context and talk about those different things, and then focus on the matchups from week to week, because really that's what the NFL is all about, is matchups, how teams are going to match up against each other. What are the strategies that they're going to employ during, coming into the game? We talked about it. I think, and we'll talk about it a little bit more with the Cincinnati Baltimore game. We said, hey, Cincinnati's got a shot in this, and they've got to come in very well prepared, and Baltimore's got to bring their A game as well. But the thing is we knew what Baltimore was going to do, and so did the Bengals, and the Bengals played very well against it. Now, Bengals then go into New York and play the Jets, and we said, hey, it's going to be a letdown game. Like, there's a high potential for a letdown game here, and the Bengals need to be prepared for that. And they weren't. That defense just couldn't really hold up. So again, it's a week to week thing. All context matters. As much as we can squeeze into these streams, um, it's I think that's important to call out for Green Bay, Arizona, because Arizona is a very good football team. Just not sure that they are undefeated quality and should be reveled as such. And I'm not sure that Green Bay. I mean, the funny thing is the NFC is really, really good, and the top of the NFC is really, really good. Problem is they all have some pretty serious flaws to them, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through the night. Odds Arizona should be 7-1 right now with a loss to an NFC North team. I mean, the Vikings play to the level of their competition, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. The NFL is how to create and exploit space and how to defend space. That's definitely a part of it, Hodzi. I think I just think it's more. I think it's hard to define into one little phrase, right? I think putting it into matchups basically says, hey, here's one big overarching concept that collects a lot of other things underneath of it and covers a lot of different things without having to try to distill it down to one single thing. So that is Green Bay and Arizona. Really fun game though. And I'm interested to see what happens with both of those teams coming up in the next few weeks, because both of them obviously are contenders. If you had to ask me who I thought is in a better position to win it right now and to be top of the AFC or NFC without including in what their schedules look like, I'm still probably leaning Arizona because I trust Arizona's defense more than I trust Green Bay's at this point. I think both are very even teams. So the thing that concerns me, Hodzi, Arizona has a pretty tough stretch over the late season. Yeah, I mean, playing in the NFC West, that's why I say the schedule, right? Is because when you've got to play, even though San Francisco's not great, they can beat anybody. When you've got to play Seattle once they get Russ back, and when you've got to play the Rams twice, like playing all of those teams twice certainly hurts. So overall, we'll see. But if you were to tell me who they're matching up, I would still pick Green Bay. I had no idea why Green Bay would be plus 6.5. And that seemed crazy to me, even with Devontae Adams out. So fun game overall. All right, Rams and Texans. Not going to spend a ton of time here. Again, we opened it up, kind of pissed off at this game because the Rams were up 38-0 going into the fourth quarter. They were completely and utterly dominant in this game. And then the Rams just kind of said, hey, we're going to hit the showers whenever the fourth quarter started. And when they basically kind of checked out, the Texans turned around and dropped 22 unanswered. And they end up matching, what the total or what the spread was, which is really unfortunate because we had them at minus 16. I think we had them at like minus 14.5 on Thursday. So really it should count as a win, but ultimately it counts as a push because that's what we recorded on Sunday. I think, what do we want to cover here? We've talked about how Matt Stafford, he's a really good QB and he's playing really well, but like, let's not crown him as a top 3 quarterback. Look, he is certainly good enough to win a Super Bowl with, especially with this team. They've added Von Miller, who we talked about. He's going to bolster their pass rush. Again, he's not dominant, but he's still a very good player. We have to feel pretty good about the Rams going forward. And then with the Texans, it's been a long time since that week 1 win, right? Like, remember, they won in week 1 and then they've looked like utter garbage since. Now they have to pay Watson the rest of the year, that salary. They have a decision to make on whether they want to play Mills and get him the reps, or if they want to play Tyrod Taylor, who is getting healthy and actually have a chance to win a game. My take on it is that they probably end up playing Mills. They've traded away most of their good talent. It's actually quite interesting to be reading It's Better to Be Feared, right, by Seth Wickersham, and reading that book, and in it he talks about the Patriots, and he's talking about how Jack Easterby and Nick Caserio were there, and I'm right up to the point of them about to leave, But the previous chapters basically detailed how it all kind of fell apart before that, and how anyone that's left Bill Belichick's orbit has basically failed. And Nick Caserio's in a really tough spot right now. It just feels like the Texans need to, they got to find new ownership is what they really need. They need to be sold. So we'll see. But that's that's all we'll do on that game. There's not a whole lot there, and there's a couple of games that were utter blowouts this week that we're probably not going to spend a ton of time on. So if you have any specific questions about any of those games that we kind of fly through, let me know. Hodzi, I think Green Bay, Tampa, Arizona, St. Louis, and Dallas could all beat each other. Yeah, any given Sunday. That's the beauty of it is really any team in the NFL can beat any other team at any given point. And so for me, obviously any of the top teams, any of the top teams are going to have that, are going to be able to beat each other. So that's Rams Texans. Let's talk Steelers Browns. So if you love the old NFC North type of football, like those cold winter days when NFC North teams used to just, run the ball and bang it up against each other and play really tough defense and drop hits on each other, play in and play out. Like this was that type of game. This really felt like that old timey type of football because it was all about who could win up front. And I thought the Steelers did a really good job up front with their defensive fronts against the Browns, who weren't able to run the ball as effectively as they had in games past. They still weren't bad, but Pittsburgh definitely made it tough on them. They wanted them to rely on Mayfield. And look, we've talked about it. We've talked a lot about how Cleveland can survive without Mayfield playing well, or even with Mayfield not even playing. And I thought this would be an example. But Pitt continues to be... the Steelers continue to outplay everything that I think that they can do. And it's really interesting because they just seem like this really gritty, tough team that just is, they know they're not going to just throttle other teams. They know that they're going to come in and they're going to have to fight for every yard, fight for every down, for every first down, and for every point. And they know that, and they play that way. And Big Ben continues to do just enough. He hasn't played well, but he continues to do just enough every single week. He gets rid of the ball very, very quickly to account for a horrible offensive line. Najee Harris shows up every 2 or 3 weeks and ends up kind of carrying the team on his back. And then Baker, here's the thing. Baker actually didn't have a bad game. Baker played really well. Baker's wide receivers need to help him out. Like you can post, OBJ's dad can post all kinds of things about him running open. Happens all the time. You can post any wide receiver. He's going to get open 10 or 20 times that he's not going to get a target on. Happens all the time. That's just where it's all about how the offense is supposed to be read by the quarterback and the progression that he goes through. And sometimes the quarterback just never needs to get to that point in the progression. And so there's going to be sometimes that receivers are wide open and they just don't get the football. And but the reality is that there are a lot of drops and a lot of missed routes and a lot of really bad stuff happening from those Browns receivers as well. So they've got to clean up their stuff. It's not all on Baker. I thought Baker played all right. He missed a few throws. But whenever the running game's not working and the defense isn't creating those turnovers, then when Baker's not able to hit on everything and when receivers are dropping balls, then that ends up being really, really painful for him. Ginger Thomas, welcome in. What can I do for you? The Browns, Hodzi, the Browns this year seem to never really game plan well. Their game plan against Arizona was trash. I think that Stefanski calls some really creative plays that work really well at times. I think they have a game plan where they know that they don't want Baker to be the guy hanging in at the end of the game and have it win it. Every time Baker's had to come in late in the game and actually win, the Browns have lost the game. If you put it on his shoulders late in the game, so far he's 0 for this year. I think he lost against Chargers, lost against Cardinals, lost against the Vikings, and then this game. Ginger, just pop in to see what you're talking about. Talk a little NFL Week 8 recap. We've talked through Green Bay, Arizona. We've talked through Rams, Texans. Talking about Browns, Steelers right now, and we'll get to the rest of the games. We also talked about trade deadline and everything that's happened through there, as well as some awful news around Henry Ruggs and some bad choices that he made last night. So, but we're trying to keep the vibes up, so we don't want to talk about that anymore. So for me, I think one of the biggest things that I took out of this game was how good Deontay Johnson is for the Steelers. That final catch that he had was huge, and I want to see more of him. I want to see them get the ball to him more. He's kind of like a guy like McCole Hardman, who I thought has been underutilized, and I've been on about Chase Claypool all season long. But Deontay Johnson really seems to be the guy that can get those slants, those shorter routes, and get the ball and run after the catch. So interested to see how much they get him involved. Najee Harris is for real. And they can rush the passer. And now they're down Melvin Ingram, but they didn't use him correctly anyways. So I do think that the Steelers should be just fine with that. Look, the Steelers they're not a Super Bowl team, but they're able to keep some other teams out of the playoffs. They can play spoiler in the AFC North. That's for sure. Well, let me look at let me see what the standings are in the AFC North right now. All right, so we got the Ravens at 5-2, Bengals at 5-3, Steelers at 4-3, and Browns at 4-4. So, I mean, less than 2 games separating the Ravens and the Browns at this point. What is that, a game and a half? Yeah, a full game and a half. So, super tight in AFC North. That's going to be a fun division. Do I think the Steelers hang in there that long? I mean, it's possible. They feel like an 8-9 win team. And that's basically where they're sitting at this point. So, we'll see how that one turns out. Overall, did not expect Pittsburgh to be able to win this game, and there's obviously some major questions about Cleveland at 4-4. Like, they were supposed to be one of the top teams in the AFC, and now they're just not quite there yet. The AFC North has the best record out of any division, don't they? No, I think that's the AFC. It might be. It used to be the AFC West. It might be the AFC North. They have 3 winning teams and one 500 team. Yeah, because the AFC West is now 5-2, 4-3, 4-4. The rest of the AFC ain't there. It definitely ain't the NFC East. And not the South, because Falcons and Panthers are pretty bad. And then the NFC West, the Seahawks are 3-5, which kind of brings them down. So yeah, Ginger, you're absolutely right. They do out of all of them. They're one of only 2 divisions that don't have a team under 500 right now. The other one being the AFC West. And the AFC West has the Chiefs and the Broncos both at 4-4. So yeah, that's going to be a tough division going into the end of the year. All right, let's talk about Philly Detroit. We'll get through this one pretty quickly. Listen. There are a lot of people that are on the Lions for this game, and I'm not gonna trash them, because I totally see why they thought the Lions have been scrappy and feisty, and they've played some really good teams really well, but we also know that they struggle with speed at wide receiver, and generally they struggle with speed overall. And I thought the Eagles really kind of had that matchup for them, so we went with the Eagles in this game to cover. And we had the right answer, wrong process. So it turns out Jalen Hurts only has to throw 14 times. He had 14 dropbacks, completed passes for 103 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. However, he did rush 7 rushes for 71 yards. And then Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, and Kenny Gainwell rushed 37 times combined. All in all, 46 rushes between everybody on the Eagles. 46 rushes, 236 yards, 4 rushing TDs. So if you heard Eagles fans clamoring about the run game and how they need to run it more, you're definitely going to hear more of that after this week. Again, it's Detroit. Anything that happens against Detroit, passing, running, whatever it might be, take with a grain of salt. It's that 1 week thing. Let's move to the next. Now, and the other thing is what we talked about is Jalen Hurts is great in garbage time. He's been great in garbage time. Fantastic in garbage time. But when the going gets tough, he doesn't show up particularly well. And we thought this was basically going to be a garbage time game for him, like the whole game. And it kind of turned out that way. It's just they ended up not having to ask him to do very much because they got up early and quickly, and they were always way out ahead of this particular in this particular game. So Eagles end up 3-5 after this week. Not exactly the record that they were hoping for. Even if they're looking at 4-4, that puts, I mean, at 3-5, they're still a game ahead of the Washington football team and the New York Giants. So they're still second in their division by a full game at this point. And if they could have squeezed out one win somewhere else at 4-4, they are in the conversation. The problem is the Cowboys are just too good at 6-1, and continue to show up no matter whether Dak's in the game or not. We'll talk about that one as well. We'll get through Philly there. So Philly, Detroit. All right, San Francisco, Chicago. So this one was a fun game. This one was a game that I was intrigued by the matchup of. There was a bunch of narratives going into this game. And since we talked about narratives, I think we should talk about the Justin Fields narrative. Look, you're not allowed, people shouldn't be allowed to go on national TV and claim to be an analyst and an expert and say, and after last week, after Justin Fields faces, the Bucks and has the worst game of his rookie career, like absolutely destroyed by the Bucks defense and Todd Bowles in that particular game, and go in and say, hey, it's too early to judge Justin Fields. We can't judge him. It's too early. And then a week later, he comes out and he looks like a much better player and go, see, I told you. He was good. He's going to be great. And it's like, wait a second. It was 1 week made the difference between last week and this week. Last week, we can't judge him because he played bad, because it didn't confirm your priors. And then this week, it confirmed your priors. And now all of a sudden, you're saying, hey, we can judge him because he had one good week. It's like, it's not the way that this works. And people who say that should probably be called out about it. But that's how ESPN and those type of things work. So I would say, here's the thing. I would say Fields had definitely his best start as a QB in the NFL, and it all happened sans Matt Nagy. So all of a sudden, everyone's back on the train because Matt Nagy's out. Fields looks good, and everybody wants to hop back on the Justin Fields train, and they think that it's better without Matt Nagy as the conductor of the Justin Fields train. But the reality is that he gave up the captain's chair a few weeks ago whenever Laser took over calling plays on offense, and albeit supposedly with input from Nagy. And I tweeted out on Sunday, Justin Fields, when he looks good, he looks really good. He looks stellar, and he is an absolute joy to watch. The problem is when he looks bad, he looks really bad. He looks like he's lost, doesn't have a clue what a football is or how to read a defense. And you saw most of the good. You saw pretty much all of the good. He threw the ball with confidence, which is a major thing for him, because that's when he really shows off that stellar accuracy. And he showed that off on his first TD throw. He was rolling to his left. He fired a dime kind of back across his body, but in conjunction with the way that he was rolling to a sliding, I can't remember if it might have been Komet. It might have been the tight end or a wide receiver, but he when he's able to do that, it looks the way it should. The throws, the movement, the arms, the legs, like everything's in unison. The other thing is he brought his legs with him to this game too, and that's something that he needs to use more. Normally, I'm all about a young QB, especially a rookie QB, staying in the pocket until the very last second to learn how to feel the pressure, how to manipulate the pocket. But Fields is not close to being there yet, and he can't identify a pressure to save his life, because sometimes his life is at stake when he's unable to identify some of the pressures that teams are beating him and that teams are bringing against him. And he has to use his legs just to keep his life going. And a great example of that, the 4th and 1 TD that he had, it's 4th and 1. He rolls out to his right a little bit, has to make a couple guys miss, rolls back left, and then ends up just wanting to run for it, and then jukes a couple guys on the way to, I think it was like a 15-yard touchdown or something like that. Like that's the Fields that I want to see on a weekly basis. And with that and his arm combined, when everything works for him, oh my God, it looks so good. The problem is he's just not there yet. So I mean, Fields this weekend, he was like an ace with hardware. Like he had all of his tools on display, and it's a lot of fun to watch that. It's a lot of fun to see. The problem with this game for the Bears was their defense. It's looked good for stretches this year, but now it looks like it can't stop anyone. Mac was out of this game, and that's a big factor, but it's not enough they couldn't stop anybody. And adding Mac to this game isn't going to change the outcome of this particular game. They looked really bad. And I thought that they had looked pretty good a few weeks before that, but then last week didn't look good. This week didn't look good. I'm starting to wane on my thought that maybe they're actually good, and they definitely feel like they definitely aren't. They can't get pressure. Jalen Johnson I think he's a good corner, but he can't, like, nobody in that secondary can cover anyone at this point. They were so bad that Jimmy G looked like the Jimmy G of old. He hit a few beautiful throws for big gains, so good on him. I think that's huge for Jimmy G, because if he doesn't have a good game this week, it's probably Trey Lance time, and it probably sticks with Trey Lance going forward. And it still might be, who knows? But he may have helped stave it off for at least another week. JG ended up being 17 of 28, 322, no passing TDs, thanks to Deebo Samuel, but did rush 2 in. So if you were watching, Deebo Samuel channeled inner inner Jerry Rice, came out with 6 catches, 171 yards, including, I think it was an 84-yarder where he was tackled at the 2. And that should have been a passing touchdown for Jimmy Garoppolo, but ends up being a rushing touchdown for him instead. Elijah Mitchell pops off for 137 yards and a TD on 18 carries. Like, the offense they were still a little off, still not totally in sync early, but they found its form later in the game. Not only does Jimmy G quiet the haters, but so does Shanny. Because remember, last week, there's a lot of people going after Shanny. Oh, he actually has a losing record as a head coach, and his play calling hasn't been. Look at the game last week. He had 2 good drives and then didn't stick with them. I was part of that, right? I was like, I still think he's a good play caller. I just don't understand why he had those 2 drives last week, only did what he did on those 2 drives, and he did the exact same thing on those 2 drives and then went away from it, and it ends up costing him the game against the Colts. Again, waterlogged game, but at the same time, like, stick with what's working. So he deserves some of the criticism, but I thought that there was a little bit too much. Like, people just all of a sudden went from Shanny's a great play caller and a solid head coach to he's awful and he needs to be fired. And the question becomes, do you fire him and John Lynch or just him? And I'm like, wait a second, relax a little bit. Like, let's let the rest of this season play out, because I don't think the 49ers are as bad as they've looked. And this was a nice little bounce back game for them. Granted, it's against the Bears. But I did think that offense needed a game like this. And the thing is Shanahan's trying to do this with a bad Jimmy G showing up most of the time, like an inaccurate Jimmy G showing up. And that makes a big, big difference. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how well they develop Trey Lance and when he gets his shot. It's funny because I can't figure out the San Francisco defense. Like, they're not good against the pass, but they're good enough against the rush and it kind of fluctuates from week to week, which is weird. I would say they're more of a liability than an asset at the moment, though they're probably overall middle of the pack. Like, they can't cover anybody, but they also, they play a quarters type of defense where they're trying to keep everything in front of them. So I think the 49ers are hard to pinpoint right now. But I would expect that Shanahan has an idea of where he wants this team to go. And, I'm not counting them out yet. I know that they're 3-4 and one of, if not the toughest division in all of the NFL and the NFC West. Not counting them out yet. I think they've got a run in them. And right now, if I look at I was looking at this earlier, the playoff picture in the NFC has let's see, So it's funny because you have the 6-1 Vikings who are in 8th, and then the 49ers are 9th at 3-5. So if the Panthers are actually in the playoffs right now at 3-4. Wait, that's not right. At 4-4, sorry. Panthers are 4-4. Vikings and Niners are 3-4 at 8-9. And Panthers are in at 4-4. So if they can get back to 500 or a little bit over, 49ers have a shot. And I think they're good enough to do it. We'll see if they can start piecing some things together down the stretch. I think they have 2 losses versus the NFC West. Yeah, they're not gonna win the NFC West. I think that's out of the question. I think when you're looking at the Rams and the Cardinals sitting atop of that division at 7-1 each, like they're not gonna win the NFC West. They're gonna have to sneak in with a wild card. And it's not unheard of that one division takes 2 of the wild card spots. Hodsy. This week will be very interesting, especially if Kyler can't go. I actually haven't looked ahead to this week's games yet. Are you saying that Arizona and so I know Seattle's got a bye week. Oh, Arizona, San Francisco this week in San Francisco. It'll be very interesting. Now, I said last time whenever these two teams matched up, it was the first Trey Lance game. Trey Lance looked horrible in that particular game. He was inaccurate, couldn't read a defense, didn't know what the hell he was doing. I think his running game is valuable against a team like the Cardinals. And I think that this may be one of those games where if Trey Lance is healthy, they could end up going with that 2 quarterback system to kind of throw the cards off. But we'll see. They'll definitely have some Trey Lance packages if he's healthy. If he's not fully healthy, they'll probably just stick with Jimmy G because Jimmy G wasn't there for the last game. So interesting matchup this week. Good call out, Hodsy. All right. Let's see. We did Bears, Niners, Panthers, Falcons. We probably won't spend time here. Spend a ton of time here. This is another Carolina ends up winning 19-13. They were actually the underdogs in this game. Previously, I had talked about like coming into this game on the pregame show on Sunday. I talked about how Sam Darnold, he's going to look better against the Atlanta defense. Like they're a good medicine for a bad quarterback. He did look better. He still did not look great. And then he got hit late in the game and concussed. PJ Walker ends up coming in and closes it out. Now, for Atlanta, they look troubled by the Panthers defense. And this is an Atlanta offense that had looked pretty good in the previous couple of weeks, right? Had gotten Kyle Pitts going. Matt Ryan came into this game absolutely on fire, like one of playing as a top quarterback in the NFL over the last 3 weeks before this week. And that's not an exaggeration at all. All the data backs that up. He really was playing extremely well. And the Falcons were trying to kind of figuring it out on offense, but it ends up being that Stephon Gilmore in this defense ends up being too much. Stephon Gilmore got the interception at the end to close it out. Shaq Thompson also had a pick. Shaq Thompson played one of the better games I thought he's played all season, if not his best game all season. And that's saying a lot because he's had a few really good games this season. He was so quick to the ball, so quick to the line of scrimmage, good in coverage, good in the gaps at the line of scrimmage. Pretty much everything he did in this game was good. So Carolina's defense is really good. I would say I don't know if they're really good, but they're definitely good. I just can't get behind this team and particularly this offense without CMC and with Darnold at quarterback. And here, I don't think PJ Walker is going to do anything special. I just don't think he's that type of guy. The defense is good enough against bad teams, but they've struggled against good teams. And I'm curious to see how the rest of this season plays out with Gilmore, because I do think that he ends up adding another element to this team, especially this defense that they need. And Pitts, it's funny because Pitts didn't have a good game, but Carolina had keyed on him all game. He was bracketed a bunch. He had to be perfect to be able to catch a pass, and that basically eliminates a big part of the Atlanta offense, especially without Ridley in there, who's out indefinitely because he's taking care of some personal issues. And I think that's an important point for Carolina, because I think it's when teams have multiple weapons that Carolina's defense struggles. But when they can key on one thing or two things and take it away, I think that really helps their defense. And it also helps when the opposing team like Atlanta has a bad offensive line. So, yeah, I think Carolina feels like an almost 8-8. Well, what 8-9, 9-8 team, like an almost 8-9 team or 9-8 team, but they're just not quite there yet, especially with Darnold. We'll see what happens with PJ Walker, see if he actually gets some reps in, or if Darnold gets through concussion protocol and starts this week. It wouldn't surprise me if even if Darnold doesn't get through, it does get through concussion protocol if PJ Walker doesn't actually start. Carolina seems to be completely behind Sam Darnold, but I just don't know. Just don't know. I don't think he's the guy. I don't think anybody believes that he's the guy at this point. Problem is they're still stuck with him and his entire contract next year. All right, Dolphins Bills. Again, another game. I feel like we shouldn't probably spend a whole lot of it. So we'll get a little bit. I think this one was one where we talked about how Buffalo was going to key on one particular thing: all of the out routes that Tua throws. If you take away those out routes and those short completions for Tua, it makes the game very, very hard for him to be successful because he just doesn't have the arm strength nor the ability to read the deeper parts of the defense and read through traffic and throw with anticipation in the middle of the field. So if you take away those short outside routes, Tua becomes a very undynamic quarterback. Basically, he becomes a running back in the pocket at that point. I will say Tua was fortunate early in that his wide receivers made some big plays because that's exactly what Buffalo did. They keyed on those out routes and they started squatting on them. They were squatting within those 5 yards to start the game. And it's funny because Miami noticed Buffalo sitting on those routes. And they actually on the second, I think it was second drive, maybe the third drive, they started throwing slants instead of outs. So as those guys were squatting down towards the sidelines, they started running in breaking routes instead. And Tua hit a couple of those. There was a big one to Parker that he took down the field. And early on, that was the thing is Tua was basically, he wasn't able to throw what he wanted to throw. So he was kind of having to throw the ball up, and his wide receivers were actually making plays. Gesicki made a nice play. Devontae Parker made a nice play on the sideline. That on just those on the first drive gets them down. I think they ended up missing their first kick, if I remember correctly. They ended up getting a sack on the second drive, which killed it. I think it goes 3-3 at that point. And then, yeah, it goes 3-3 to it, then gets the ball, tries to take his team, gets them down in field goal range near the end of the half. But a bad snap ends up as a fumble, and it stays tied 3-3 at the half. Like it was 3-3 at the half in this game. And then Buffalo comes out, they've adjusted and Miami hasn't. So Buffalo takes the lead on a broken coverage. Left wide receiver wide open in the corner of the end zone on a Allen pocket escape. Bills get a quick stop, and then Allen hits Diggs for another TD on the other end. Now that's starting to pile up, and then Miami does try to come back. Tua ends up coming back. He hits Gesicki for a touchdown, ends up leading Miami to a 2-point conversion. They were down 14. They score the touchdown. They go for 2 there. They get it. Bills answer with a good drive and a field goal. That put it at 20-11 at that point. And it still felt like the Bills were in control, but Miami felt like they could poke a hole in that. The problem is Tua ends up fumbling. Miami comes up with it, puts Miami in a 3rd and 26, and then Poyer intercepts Tua as he's trying to push the ball downfield. Again, when Tua pushes the ball downfield, it's just the windup is so big and the juice behind it is so little that there's so much time for defenders to react to it. Allen ends up taking it in for the final score, and actually ends up covering late in the game with 1:07 left. Miami's got to figure out what the hell to do with Tua. And they can say that that's their guy for the rest of the year, but I hope he's not the guy forever. He just doesn't have all of the tools necessary. And it's hard to run an offense that way. That was a bad beat with Allen TD. It was a good beat for me because, I mean, honestly, the Bills deserve to win that game by 25 points probably. But Miami decided that they wanted to fight and claw and try to hang in there. So I'm sorry it was a bad beat for you, Gabe, but it was the way that it should have. They should have covered that 14 for sure. Miami's got a lot. I don't I don't see how Brian Flores ends up making it out of Miami alive this year. And honestly, I don't know that he like wants. He probably wants to stick around for that coach's salary for the head coach pay. But when you've got Tua and not a whole lot of firepower on either line right now, they have they probably have the worst offensive line in the NFL, one of the worst defensive lines in the NFL. That's not good, man. He needs 2 or 3 more years to be able to fix that the way that it needs to be. If he could get a couple of good pass rushers, draft a couple of fill-ins, in the next year, they've got possible to be a solid team. But man, I just don't think it's there for him yet. Um, Nothing topped the Clemson FSU bad beat with the lateral play, which covered Clemson spread and over. Oh, I didn't see that one. I had Buffalo covering on Pick'em. That's good. Also, Philly owns the number 2 pick in the NFL draft next year, which is Miami's. Yep, they sure do. They sure do. And Carson Wentz is most definitely going to clear that 75%. Because by the way, there's typically a good faith clause in those where they can't run him up to 70, like they can't run Carson up to 74% and then just sit him for the rest of the year. Um, or the good faith clause will kick in, or they can challenge it with the good faith clause. So I do think that that one's pretty much the Colts pick is pretty much dead and gone as well. Let's see. So Philly, it's actually a really interesting question. So if we're looking, Miami. So Philly won. So Philly's, let's see, probably at the back end of the top 10, maybe 12th at this point. And then they've got the Texans, and then the Colts all of a sudden decided to turn it around and start playing football. So they've got 3 top 12 picks right now. Philly does. Interesting. Which, oh, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean that they have to take 3 picks. They could trade those for, a certain quarterback out of Wisconsin to get him onto their team as long as he's willing to come. So just floating that out there is something that might be interesting to watch if they can covet him and convince him that he wants to come. All right, Bills Dolphins. Bengals Jets. So this was one of the more intriguing outcomes of the week, right? So here's the thing, if I had picked the Jets to cover, I would absolutely use this next 5 minutes to take a victory lap for calling this letdown game, because I felt like it was going to be a letdown game, but I also felt like Cincinnati was going to be too talented for this Jets team to hang with in the end. So I felt like Cincinnati might cover towards the end. I didn't expect them to lose. I did expect them to come in for a letdown. Mike White for president, Hodzi. Look, Mike White played well, but let's not go bananas. He was 37 of 45 for 405. That's a lot of throws. Even for 400 yards, it's a lot of throws. There were a couple of picks to go with his 3 TDs. I think what stood out to me in this game is what we've talked about in the past about how good teams squeeze out bad teams near the end of the game. Bengals are up 24-17 going into the fourth quarter, and the Jets ended up dropping 17 in the fourth quarter and end up winning the game. That's a failure of play calling on both sides of the ball, of game management, and of being able to use your advantage as the leader by the Bengals. Like that was just there's poor execution on the players' part, don't get me wrong, but man, the coaches have to be better. That's as bad as 28-3 because you're up 17 going into the fourth quarter and you can't hang. Sorry. Hit the microphone again. So you're up 17 going into the fourth quarter and you can't hold off the Jets. Not just the Jets, but the Jets with the backup quarterback. which, by the way, the backup quarterback has played as well as the starter has all season. So in limited snaps. Now, look, small sample size, so let's not get crazy. I thought Shaq Lawson, Quentin Williams both had really good games, both had huge plays at the end. But they shouldn't have been able to make those plays. Bengals should have never allowed it to get to that point. And then the other thing is that was one of the worst penalties there was one of the worst penalties I've ever seen called in a football game. So if you missed it, there is a point where there's a guy that's going, a defender that's going in for a tackle. I think he's being blocked on the play. And he's kind of like, he falls to the ground, like he's falling to the ground, not like he's diving, but like he's falling to the ground, and he's going at the guy's legs, right? At probably his thigh pads, maybe his knee area, something like that. He's already committed, and he's dove out in front. So he's like, he's here and he's dove out here waiting for the guy to come into the running back to come into his way, or the receiver. The receiver braces for it, drops his head, hits the guy with the crown of his helmet, hits the receiver, takes the crown of his helmet, puts it into the helmet of the defender. They throw the flag and they're like, oh, it's going to be crown of the helmet on the offense. It's crown of the helmet on the defense. And it ends up playing a big part in the end of this game, and ends up basically losing the Bengals the game. It was easily one of the worst flags of the weekend, if not the season. I definitely of the season, maybe one of the worst ones I've ever seen called. That one particular, I'm not one to be like, oh my God, we need to change everything because of one call. That one particular call makes me like, if there's a 15-yard penalty involved, it needs to be reviewable. Like the whole targeting is reviewable in college. Like if you're going to call crown of the helmet, you need to, like, there have been so many instances where it's been a receiver catches the ball and he's about to get hit in the side, and he just ducks down and drops his head to protect himself because he knows he's got a helmet on, and it ends up being helmet to helmet. That to me is incidental, and it shouldn't be called. And there are so many of those that get called, and that was a big play in this particular game. Ends up basically costing the Bengals a win. It's just unfortunate. And I tweeted today, like, we have to acknowledge that we talked about this a little bit in Arizona, Green Bay, right? We have to acknowledge that one or two plays can decide the outcome of the game and how that game is viewed throughout the history of the season. And I think the refs need to understand that as much as anybody and remove themselves from the equation wherever possible. No one's ever said, oh, the refs were really great and they ended up winning this game for this team because they made the right call. Like, just let them play. Just let them play. Only throw flags where it's absolutely necessary, where it's just an egregious foul. And not doing it on one team or the other, because you could argue that happened with the Bucks and that the Bucks kind of got screwed this weekend. But to me, it's hard. Yes, it's hard to play against the refs, and if they're calling everything against you and all that, I get it. That's usually more emotional than it is factual. Whatever people say, things like that, but it certainly does impact and influence the end of a game. Just super disappointing to see. What else? What else do we want to talk about? One of the interesting things about this game was, for the Jets, some guys showed up in this game that no one expected to show up, right? So Michael Carter has a huge line, 15 rushes, 77 yards, a TD, added 9 catches for 95 yards. Huge game for him. Everyone's been waiting for Denzel Mims to break out. So, of course, Ty Johnson ends up catching 5 passes for 71 yards and a touchdown. Ty Johnson maybe had the catch of the week down the sideline. That was really impressive. He goes up and gets it, and somehow it plays twinkle toes along the sideline for a while. That was super impressive. I'll say this about Mike White. What I noticed this weekend is White is not afraid to throw the ball up to his receivers in positive situations and let them try to win. The Jets' skill position players aren't awful. So it's not the worst idea, especially against the Bengals defense that we've talked about as not being as good as what they may have appeared in the past. I think the Bengals played well against Baltimore, but it's probably not going to be that way every week. Like they're not going to have the perfect game plan and the perfect execution like they did against Baltimore. They're middle of the pack defense. They can match up in certain situations in certain games, but overall they're not going to be a defense that just chokes the life out of people or out of teams. So this is one of those games that showed that when the Bengals when they can't cover, they can't stop the run and they can't tackle, it's going to be hard for the offense to make up all of that against even bad teams. I'd expect that type of volatility, but from the Bengals defense and from Mike White, while he's played pretty well, he's done what he needs to do. And he's a young guy, and I want to give him context for that. But the goal is to win, right? And he won this week, but I don't. It's a small sample size. I'll put it like that. He did very well in a small sample size. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. Hoodsy, to go back here, it is why I have big faith in Arizona. They've closed out games so well this year. Yeah, and that's part of it, right? Is closing out games. They've had a couple of situations where they were lucky, but good teams tend to be a little bit luckier than bad teams because they put themselves in situations where probability favors them. It's not just luck. It's they're in better situations because again, it's why analytics is so important is because when you make good decisions, good things tend to happen more often. That's not an accident. That's not getting lucky. That's just playing the probabilities. So, if you have a, if you have, a two-headed coin, you know that it's going to end up being 100% heads, right? Like, that it's not like you're not getting lucky that it's landing on heads. You know that it's going to land on heads because you played the probability. So, overall, it's super fun game to watch. Crazy to watch the back and forth in this particular game. The Bengals had it won and they just couldn't put it away. They just could not put it away. All right, let's keep moving. Titans Colts. So, it's funny. I don't know whether both teams deserve to win this game or both teams deserve to lose this game because both played well at points and both played horrible at points. It's funny because on Sunday I tweeted towards the end of the fourth quarter, Carson Wentz was coming onto the field and taking the ball deep in with his back against his goal line, and I said, "Hey, he's either going to be a hero and win this game and look like a baller, or he's going to lose this game in embarrassing fashion." And it actually ended up being a little of both. At first it was very embarrassing. So he's got his back to the goal line. He's in the grasp. He's falling down, and he tries to do what Carson Wentz does, and he tries to do too much. Falls to the ground, throws it directly to Tennessee guy standing 2 feet in front of him. And that guy takes the ball and carries it into the end zone, the whole half yard that he had to carry it in. And it ends up being a pick six to put them down by a touchdown late in the game. I think there was like a minute something left at that point. Just insane decision by Carson Wentz. No, look, there are people saying, oh, well, it's better for them to for him to throw a pick six there than to take a safety. And I'm going, there's no shot he thought about that in the moment. There's no shot. He's like, hey, it's better if I just go ahead and just hand this ball off to the defense instead of me just taking a safety here. No shot did that cross his mind. If you're saying that, you're just trying to make excuses for him. That was just a horrible play and incredibly embarrassing for a player who continues to do embarrassing things like that. So stop defending your boy. Like that's who he is. The funny thing is he then gets the ball back, ends up leading them back to a game-tying touchdown to push it into overtime. And then in overtime, Tennessee ends up winning. There was a couple changes of possessions, 44-yard field goal by the Titans, ends up winning it overall. I think this is a super important game because this would have put Indy into contention for the division. And now with Tennessee at 6-2 and Indy at 3-5, it now feels out of reach. The AFC South and playoffs, for that matter, feel out of reach. And the thing is even with Henry's injury, it keeps the door open a little bit for the Colts, but it's not much. It's just the tiniest little sliver of a crack of the door being open. If the Titans were 5-3 and Indy was 4-4, it's totally different. They're a game out instead of 2 full games back and a loss to Indy at this point. It's a good thing that the Titans won, because they may need that little bit of cushion with Derrick Henry getting hurt and being out for the rest of the season. So I think while Carson has been playing well, I do think we've got to go back and we have to acknowledge that he's had an insane amount of turnover worthy plays. And the context of it being in the rain and all that against the 49ers, but he made too many stupid decisions. Not physical mistakes because the ball was wet, but stupid mental mistakes that has nothing to do with the weather, or very little to do with the weather. I mean, it probably played into it at some point, but those are things that those are decisions he just can't make, and he continues to do so. He tries to do too much. Now, he got away with it whenever he was at the Eagles, physical enough, athletic enough, big enough, healthy enough, could move a little bit better. He tried to do too much back then, and he got away with it to a higher degree. It's basically kind of like he's trying to do Mahomes type of stuff, but he's just not at that level of play. And it typically ends up being bad. Like, he's Jameis. He's basically Jameis. Like, all of the stupid decisions that everybody laughs at Jameis for doing, Carson Wentz does the same thing. And yet, for some reason, we still say Carson Wentz is a great quarterback. Some people say he's a great quarterback. Like, you can't play that way and be a really good quarterback. He can play well. He just has some insanely stupid plays that are just completely inconceivable. And that's going to be a problem for them going forward. I mean, it happens every single game. There's always a weird shovel pass, toss, fumble that he just... There was one that went off of his knee that ended up in the belly of a defensive tackle who, basically intercepted the snap. So, like, there's just been some weird things that Carson's done to give the ball away this year. Tennessee without Henry, I don't think it's going to be as bad as people think. As long as Brown and Julio are healthy. They signed AP. They basically signed the ghost of Derrick Henry to try to play the Derrick Henry role. I'd have to look at Tennessee's schedule, but they don't have to be great to close out the division and make the playoffs. So as long as the final schedule isn't too bad, they should be just fine. Again, we're halfway through the season, so anything can change. But I would expect them to be just fine. We talked about it. Ryan Tannehill isn't playing horribly. He's good enough to get it done for them. Though I don't think they want him throwing 45 times a game either. Titans should be fine. But without Derrick Henry, there's obviously a big question mark there. All right, Pats Chargers. This was a very interesting game. I was super excited about this game. So Justin Herbert ends up throwing 2 picks. I could argue neither of those picks were his fault. Cook, on the one that basically destroyed the game for them, Cook looked like he had no idea what was going on. It was a throw into the flat, and it ends up turning into a pick 6. Like, I still feel like neither one of those were Herbert's fault. Hodzi on Pats Chargers. We have to talk about the commentary post game by Herbert around the defenses he faced. Yes, that's my main point about this game, Hodzi. It's my main point about that. I don't know if you were here for the pregame on Sunday, but we talked about that specifically, and we'll get into it. I thought the Chargers would come out and play much better out of the bye week. They did not. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. For New England, Mac Jones did start to open it up, and his stats suffered a little bit because of it. But I think he did a good job of taking shots without being careless with his throws. It was a weird game because I thought both of these QBs played better than their stats would show. Like, if you're just doing box score scouting, you're going, "Ooh, Mac and Herbert, they didn't play very well." I thought they played all right. I think it was a solid game for both of them. It was just some kind of weird stuff happening that wasn't really their fault. And like I said, Mac trying to push the ball down the field is a good thing, I think. His efficiency stats are going to suffer a little bit until he's able to start kind of getting into that rhythm of stretching the field a little bit more. but it was good to see them open that up. I'm surprised that the Pats didn't just try to hammer the run a little bit, but they did play that cover two high defense that we thought that they would play. Now, this is what Hodsy's talking about. So, on the Chargers, after the game, Justin Herbert was interviewed, and there were some quotes that come out, and I haven't seen the actual interview itself, so I may be missing some context here. But the quotes that were floated out there on Twitter were basically Herbert said, here, I want to make sure that I get this pretty quickly. So Herbert said that the Patriots basically tricked them in this game because they ended up going into too high when the Chargers weren't expecting. They didn't come into the game expecting that. And then the other thing is he also said that it was something that the Patriots hadn't shown on tape this season. They hadn't seen it on tape. Now, I have a couple of gripes with both of those things. So first of all, we talked about too high specifically in our pregame show. Specifically talked about too high. We said that this is what they were going to do. And I'm so confused as to why the Chargers didn't see this coming, because we saw it coming. We knew it. I got we can go back and watch the VOD right now. And if it wouldn't take me so long to find it, I would show you. But we talked specifically about how the Patriots are going to play too high. They'll do it in man, they'll do it in zone, they'll play a little bit of cover 2 zone. They're not going to let, our whole reasoning was they're not going to let Mike Williams beat them. This is going to be a good game for Keenan Allen, because Keenan Allen's going to be able to get open underneath that too high. He's the type of receiver that's better for that, while they're trying to protect against the deep ball to Mike Williams. It's exactly what we thought was going to happen, and it's exactly what happened. So I don't understand how they could have seen this coming when we talk specifically about this is exactly what the Patriots are going to do. And then the second point, and the more disturbing point, is we said, hey, they're going to do this because we've seen them do this against other teams. They've done it against the Pats, or they've done it against the Bucks. They've done it against the Cowboys. We've seen the too high before. Well, apparently either I got it wrong and I'm not seeing the right stuff, because I feel like I've seen it. I watched it against the Cowboys. I watched it against the Bucks. And again, the Bucks had the rain and all that, but fine. But you can go back and watch those 2 games for yourself, and you will see too high. And it's not generally what the Pats want to do or what they do the most of, but it's not like it's not on film. And there's a specific time when they do that, and it's against teams with big boy passing offenses that can stretch the field, like the Bucks, the Cowboys, and the Chargers. We knew this was coming. We've seen it in previous games. Justin Herbert says, had no idea it was coming. Never seen it on film before. And that just blows my mind that he says that. Now, look, he said that, so Hadsy, you're right. So he basically said that they weren't prepared for it because they were showing single high and rotating into too high. And that's where he got confused. And that's where I want to go back, and I actually want to listen. I actually want to go back and listen to the commentary and to him actually talking about this. And I don't even know if there is a video of it. There probably is somewhere. Because if he's saying if his focus is they don't typically play single high and rotate into too high, so first of all, they do, and they've put that on film a little bit here and there. Not as much as playing too high, just flat out. But I was just completely just thrown sideways by that, because it's just not either what I'm seeing is completely inaccurate or completely wrong, and I don't know what I'm looking at. Which is, absolutely possibly the case, knowing me, or they missed something. And they missed something over the bye week. And if that's the case, it makes me a little bit concerned. So very weird comments by Herbert after that one. I don't understand that one. Don't understand that one at all. And I thought that whenever he said that, I thought I was crazy. And I saw some folks who watch a good amount of all 22, and they're like, yeah, that doesn't sound right to me either. So, interesting. makes me a little bit nervous about Chargers and what they're seeing and how they're game planning, because I've been a huge Brandon Staley fan all season. So I don't take it. I take this more of New England is going to continue to play tough games. I think it makes me drop the Chargers a little bit, not because of the coaching and or not because of the comments by Justin Herbert. It does make me a little bit nervous about the coaching, that they were not at all prepared. And by the way, he said that they had to go into the half and adjust. If they're playing cover two is a day one install in training camp. So I don't know why it takes you. If a team starts playing cover two, there should be a box on the play sheet that says cover two beaters. Cover two beaters. These are the things we know. And everybody should have that in their arsenal every single week. You may not practice it during the week, but just because you don't practice it during the week doesn't mean that you shouldn't know it inside and out, because every week you're going to need to be able to beat cover two. So I don't know why it took them so long to adjust to it, but good game plan by the Patriots. They got what they needed out of the offense. Mac Jones pushes the ball down the field a little bit. I want to pull. Mac Jones pushes the ball down the field a little bit. They get a solid running game, 23 for 80 out of Damian Harris and a touchdown. Brandon Bolden gets four touches for 26 yards. Ramondre Stevenson, 8 for 25. Not much in terms of catches out of the backfield. Not much. Mac Jones did spread the ball around, but again, 218 yards isn't a ton. No touches, no picks, 1 sack. Did rush for 10 yards on 4 attempts. So they did what they needed, right? Justin Jackson ends up busting out a long play. That was pretty much his entire production of the day. Eckler, 64 yards on 11 rushes, 1 touchdown, did catch 6 times for 60 yards. So overall solid day for him. Keenan Allen ends up with the only decent day out of any of the receivers, 6 for 77 and a touch. Jared Cook, who really should be credited with the turnover, not Justin, ends up with 2 catches for 25 yards. Mike Williams, 5 targets, 2 catches, 19 yards, just as we said. That was the Patriot. The Patriots are so defined in what they want to do and need to do every single week that we call their game plans on the pregame show every single week. It's basically they identify what teams do well and they take that away. Now, there may be a couple of questions about exactly how do they do that, but for the most part, if we know this and see this, NFL teams should see this as well. So, fascinating game. Drops Chargers a little bit. Maybe I underestimated the Patriots. I still don't think they're a great team. I'm not sold on the defense. Matt Judon, good player. They had a couple other guys show up over the last couple of weeks, but I'm not there yet on the Patriots, and I don't know that I will be there. I mean, they're 4-4, I think, at this point. Patriots are 4-4. They're 2 games behind, or a game and a half behind the Bills at this point. So I'm not there. I mean, they're going to get lucky. They're probably going to play a pretty soft schedule, which is going to keep them in it for the rest of the year, but nothing crazy, I don't think. All right, let's keep it moving. Jags Seahawks. Let's not spend a ton of time here. Geno Smith comes out, starts ripping it. They get up big early. Basically, this was my worst pick of the week. It was a bad pick on my part, but it was also very unfortunate because it took away the one thing that I said the Jags would be able to do and could do because of James Robinson, is they would be able to run the ball and potentially be able to keep this close. James Robinson gets injured early, and the problem is that happened after the onslaught had already begun. I think it was 14-0 by that point. And the Jags just look bad again. Lockett, huge game, accounts for 142 of Geno's 195 passing yards. Geno, although he only threw for 195, played very, very well in this game. Probably one of the better games that he's had as a pro overall. For the Jags, I just don't know how to fix them, man. Like they just show up wholly unprepared for most games. And we thought that there might be some improvement happening for them, but it just seems it'll happen, and we're like, okay, there's a glimpse, and then they just completely regress back to week one all over again. And we're almost halfway through the season, man, and just yikes. Just yikes. Like, what? There's nothing good going on. Like, Trevor Lawrence, I think Trevor Lawrence threw 50 something times in this game, if I remember correctly. Let's see. It was at least 40 something, if not 50 something. Final score 31-7 for Seattle and Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence, 54 attempts, 32 of 54, 238. He only had 238 yards on 54 attempts, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 sack. 3 rushes for 11 yards. Jags couldn't get anything done on offense. I mean, James Robinson was 4 for 22. He was averaging over 5 yards a carry in the carries that he did have. Like, I think that, and he had a catch for 17 yards. Like, I think they would have been fine had they gotten James Robinson going earlier. But him being hurt is a major detriment to this offense, because they're basically going to end up trying to put it all on Trevor Lawrence again, and it's not going to go well for him. One of the entry when Geno Smith gets sacked, he gets sacked. Like, he gets all of the sack. 3 sacks for 35 yards lost, which is just insane. 11, 12 yards per sack. Just, I mean, if you're going to get sacked, make sure you're getting really sacked. Alex Collins, 10 of 44. They really didn't do much in terms of the rush game. It's funny because the offense just doesn't look like there's a whole lot going on here. DK Metcalf had 2 touchdowns, 6 catches, 43 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tyler Lockett, 12 for 142. So, yeah, just Seattle came in prepared, ready to go. Seattle's now 3-5 at the bottom of the NFC West. And to be fair, they're only a half game off of the 49ers, who haven't had their bye week yet. But it's going to be a long climb back if they can do it. It certainly feels like this is a team that's going to finish closer to the bottom of this division, middle of the pack overall, because they can beat up on bad teams, but they can't pull out wins versus good teams. The good thing for them is bye week comes up next week. Russell Wilson potentially returns after the bye, probably returns after the bye week, but then they get Green Bay, then they get Arizona. So they're not out of it yet, but those next 2 games over 3 weeks are going to be very, very important. They're teetering on the edge of the cliff, and the next 2 games will decide, are they climbing their way back into this, or are they getting shoved off? So interesting 3 weeks coming up. Going to be a very important November. I mean, November is always important, I guess, but very, very important November for Seattle. And Hadzi, I'm going to go back and so one of the games I'm going to go watch is the Patriots on all 22. And I'm going to go back and see specifically what did Herbert see, because it was definitely in the first half is when he was seeing it. And I'm going to go back and look at some older at some of the previous weeks of New England film to see if what I remember happening actually happened, or if I'm just crazy and completely wrong. Like I said, it's not something that the Patriots like to do too high, but it is something that they will do and have done. All right, Washington, Denver. I mean, this is 2 bad teams. This is a close game until late, and then Denver ends up getting a TD to cover and win. Funny thing is Washington had a couple. The end of this game was bananas. So Washington gives it up on 4th down, right? They were in 4th and long, trying to make something happen and tie the game up in Denver territory. Denver gives the ball back. So turnover on downs by Washington. Denver ends up fumbling, ends up giving the ball back. Washington has one more shot deep in Denver territory. I think it was a Patrick Surtain breakup. It was a sack on 2nd down to make it 3rd and long, and then from there, like, Washington was just never able to make up the difference from that sack. So, and it ends up a 7-point win, which means Denver covered. Though we'll say Washington was in this to the very, very end. Rivera blew it on the kicking change. I was surprised they let Hopkins go. and it's fun to make fun of the whole the blew it as a kicker. I get it. I don't know enough about the kid to know if he's actually any good or not. So um I figured if they did it, then yeah. But I think he was what 2 for 5 in that game. I think he ended up missing 3 kicks or something like that. Um Washington never. Yeah, finishes 17-10. Gordon had the fumble late. Let's see, kicking and punting. Chris blew it. One of three. He missed 2. 1 field goal made on 3 field goals attempted. 1 of 3. Yeah, yeah. Two in the last game. Both of them blocked. One of them technically one of them it goes down as a block, but I think he hit his lineman in the back or in the back of the head with the kick, if I remember correctly. Yeah, like it was not pretty in the least. So I don't. Watch it, the so I will let's talk a little bit about kind of what happened in this game that I saw. So one, they've moved Landon Collins to linebacker, and he played pretty well at linebacker. I thought he played a really good game at linebacker. Previously, he was the safety that doesn't know to jump for a Hail Mary in the end zone and knock it down. He needs his coaches to tell him to jump and knock down a Hail Mary. So they decided that was probably the end of his safety days, put him at linebacker, and he played pretty well. Jamin Davis, I'm following him because he's a rookie guy. He's a rookie out of Kentucky, which for bless me, but forgive me for my sins, but I follow Kentucky football, being from that area originally. He's a rookie out of Kentucky. I thought he's going to be really good. He has not played very well. He was benched for the beginning of the season, got in, didn't play well, benched again, played a good like 6 quarters, and then this game did not play well. He looked like he was on the up and up and did not play well in this particular game. And then for Washington, the other thing is man, Heineke. I'll say this about Heineke. I've given Heineke a lot of shit on this show. And the reason I've done so is because he's such a boom or bust player. It's hey, I'm willing to be aggressive and throw it downfield. The problem is he doesn't have any weapon. He's got Terry McLaurin, and that's it. Like, all right, you've got Gibson and you've got JD McKissick, but those aren't guys that you're stretching the field with, right? And they're not the type of guys that Heineke needs out in the receiver position. He needs somebody that's going to go up and get the ball. Like, give him, and of course, like a Mike Evans type of player that's big and can go up and get it. It doesn't even have to be somebody like Mike Evans. Give him old Mike Williams, not the Mike Williams on the Chargers now, but like the old Mike Williams, a guy that's going to high point the ball. And he's going to do pretty well. Like a guy like Chase Claypool, he would love a guy like that. But Heineke doesn't have those guys that fit the way that he plays. And it's hard for him to just throw it up to Terry McLaurin all the time. And if he were in a position where he had guys that fit to the type of balls that he throws, I think he would look the whole idea of who Heineke is would look much, much different. And I think it showed up, right? Like he's trying to give his receivers an opportunity, but none of them are winning at the point of the catch, either in the air or on the ground. So I give him a little bit of a pass, but man, like if that's what you've got, then you need to give Kyle Allen a shot, because he's the type of guy that's going to throw it more on time than a Heineke will, and that's going to be better off for this offense and keep them on time, ahead of the chains, give them more options for third down conversions. Like they just cannot convert on third and fourth down right now. And Heineke on third down still wants to take the big boy shots instead of taking the first down. And it's just nothing on that Washington team is cohesive right now in terms of the offense and the defense, nor how inside of what the offense is playing. The receivers don't fit the quarterback. The quarterback doesn't fit the offensive line. Like the only thing that seems to fit in that offense is Gibson, and he doesn't seem to get as many touches as I would prefer for him to have. For Denver, again, they win against bad teams and they don't win against good teams. They beat Washington. They have Jerry Jeudy back. Jeudy ends up, let's see. Teddy was 19 of 26, 213, touchdown, 4 sacks, 23 yards. Melvin Gordon was 10 for 47 and a touch, 3 catches for 15 and a touch. He had a couple nice little touchdowns, actually. Let's see. Javonte Williams does get in nine carries for 35 yards, 2 catches for 13. It looks like Melvin Gordon is the overall winner of this backfield right now. We'll see if that stays towards the end of the year, or if the younger guy starts getting more reps. Tim Patrick 3 for 64, Cortland Sutton 2 for 40, Jerry Jeudy 4 for 39 in his return off of IR. So I talked about this. Jeudy is the guy that they need. They need him to be able to win at the off the line of scrimmage and get open quickly, because Teddy needs open receivers to throw to, and adding Eddie in. So again, it's not about adding, like, Jerry Jeudy as a player can come in and he, as a wide receiver, as a number one wide receiver, he can get open against pretty much any cornerback in the league. Maybe a handful of cornerbacks that are going to give him trouble in terms of him being able to get open against man coverage. It's not just about Jerry Jeudy being able to get open against that guy, right? Because what happens is when you take Jerry Jeudy out, then everybody else moves up the depth chart, right? So now all of a sudden, Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick are now trying to be the number one receiver and facing the best cornerback. So take Jerry Jeudy out, now Cortland Sutton's the number one. Cortland Sutton's not a number one. Tim Patrick's not a number one. They're barely worthy of a number two. So when Jerry Jeudy gets plugged in and everybody gets moved back down the depth chart where they should be, now all of a sudden Cortland Sutton against the number two cornerback looks a lot better. Tim Patrick against number three cornerback, probably going to win that matchup. So that's very, very important in terms of having a player like Jerry Jeudy. It allows other people to get open because they're now playing against lesser talent. So that's a big thing for Denver going forward. If they plan on beating good teams, they need Jerry Jeudy, and Jerry Jeudy and those receivers do fit what Teddy likes to do, which is he needs guys to get open, so that if guys can get open, he can hit them consistently. But he's not the type to be throwing tons of jump balls and letting his guys come down with it. He likes to throw to open receivers. So if they're there, he'll hit them. If they're not, that's when he's going to struggle. And he struggled over the last few weeks because of that. All right. Bucks Saints. Ugh. I really don't want to talk about this game. Where to start? So I made this tweet earlier that was talking about how the Cardinals, the Bucks, the Chiefs, and the Chargers all faced too high this week, and it was a significant reason for them losing, for all of those teams losing this week, and it's something that all four of these teams will continue to see going forward, because they all have high-powered offenses that can stretch the field, and it's going to be very, very hard for teams to play anything else against them. And they want these teams to run, because every time you run, you're taking the ball out of Kyler, Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes' hands, and that's a win for the defense, right? So I said that, and everybody said, well, the penalties and the defense and the defense and the penalty. I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. Of course. Like, everybody else is talking about the penalties and is talking about the failure of the defense. We've talked about that for weeks. This particular tweet was about the offense specifically and what they're going to face going forward. And that's something that these teams are going to have to get used to, and they're going to have to come in with a good game plan against. Now, look, Tom Brady still ended up throwing for 400 yards, still had a pretty high average net yards per attempt, if I remember correctly. Problem is he ends up with 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, and a fumble given up. That's not Tom Brady numbers. You can tell me that, yeah, if you want to give me all the good numbers, give me the bad too. He has 28 of 40, 375, 4 touchdowns. Looks great. 112 rating. Fantastic. Still threw 2 picks, 3 sacks, including a sack fumble that went to the other team. Those had as much hand in the game going to the Saints as anything else did. I get it. You can call that out, but it is what it is. Hodzi, regarding Arizona, you can see how much better they move the ball when taking the shorter throws and running on first down versus Green Bay. They'll learn. It's not. Here's the thing. I don't think it's about teams learning. Teams know how to beat cover 2. When other teams go into cover 2, it's we got to throw underneath. We got to attack. If we're going to attack middle, we got to attack over top of that middle linebacker in between the 2 safeties. Now, there's a couple things that and we talked about this specifically and how do you fix the Chiefs and what's wrong with the Chiefs in that segment last week or a week or 2 ago. There's a couple things that you have to be you have to be careful of. One is those teams know how to beat it. The problem is they have to be patient with it. And those guys have not shown patience. Patrick Mahomes did not show patience. We'll talk about this in the KC Giants game. First drive, opened up, moved the ball down the field. Fantastic. They ended up with a turnover, but they moved the ball down the field and got exactly what they needed. When they were patient, they moved the ball. Arizona, when they're patient, move the ball. Bucks, when they're patient, move the ball. However, there's an element of additional plays to that. These offenses are so used to being able to go up top and strike with big plays that they don't move the ball down the field as quick, and they want to continue to do those things. And it's about changing a mentality whenever you start to face that defense. And it's not that they don't know how to beat it. It's having the patience to beat it. And we talked about this specifically with the Packers whenever they played the Bengals. Bengals sat in too high the entire game, and they asked Greg Olsen, well, if a team's playing too high, how do you get them out of that? And he says, you have to run them out of it. You have to run them out of it. Run the ball up the middle, 6, 7, 8 yards of carry because they have light boxes. When you're able to do that, now all of a sudden they've got to bring extra players into the box, and then you start throwing up top again. That's how it works. And the problem is all of these teams are so used to the big plays and being able to get large chunk plays that it's hard for them to just say, all right, we're going to run for 4 yards. We're going to run for 6 yards and get a first down. All right, we're going to run for 7 yards. Oh, okay, we're going to do a little screen for 5 yards. It's very, very hard to play that way. You have to change. If your car is tooled to go, if you're driving a Ferrari, right, which is what these offenses are, and you know that you can top 200, but you got to keep it at the speed limit of 55, you're still going to get there. You're just not going to get there fast enough, but you run less risk of an accident. It's hard for a driver to do that, right? It's hard to drive a car that way. So it's very, very hard for these teams to do that, and they're going to have to figure out, how much are we willing to do that? Like I said, Brady still got chunk plays against a team that plays cover 2, that was playing a lot of cover 2 against them, or 2 high safeties against them. And yeah, he had some chunk plays, but he also paid for it a couple times. That final interception, 2 high safeties. They're right to the safety. Now, I will say that was probably on Godwin a little bit. Based on what I saw, it looked like he drifted a little bit in his route. But, I mean, the safety was able to key on that particular play and come down from over top. And that's the other thing. When you play 2 high safeties, a lot more trash in the middle, a lot more traffic in the middle of the field. If you're throwing to the middle of the field, more traffic, more tipped balls going in the air. Now you've got 2 safeties from behind. Anything that gets tipped and goes deeper into the defense, safeties are probably going to come down with. Anything that's tipped in the air, you've got 2 deep safeties that can see it crash towards where it is. So there's a lot of things about playing 2 high safety that's very valuable. That's why Tony Dungy loved it and coached his defense to crash to the football. You can play 2 high, but you got to crash to the football. And there's a lot of teams that are doing that against good football teams. So they're gonna just have to face that. I'd say, yeah, I guess that's what I mean. More so than learn, they'll get the patience and understanding. Yeah, it's they'll learn eventually through trial and error that they have to be patient with it. They don't need to learn how to beat a cover 2 defense. It's just they've got to learn their tolerance for it. Unfortunately, Jameis Winston goes down, torn ACL. He is now out for the season. Trevor Siemian come in, and I'm going to tell you something that you're probably not going to hear from anybody else. And everybody else will probably tell me I'm wrong for it. But for me, when Simeon came into this game, I said, hey, this is probably a worse matchup than playing against Jameis. Because the reality is Jameis is going to give you the ball, give you an opportunity at the ball 3 or 4 times, like really good opportunities. And Simeon ended up doing the same thing, just in a little bit different way, not as open of opportunities as maybe a Jameis would have. But Simeon gets the ball out on time more often than Jameis ever thought about it. Jameis isn't a 3-step drop back and throw it on time type of quarterback. Jameis is a 3-5. He's a 5 or 7 step drop back guy. Look down the field and try to throw it deep, and then check down when it's not there. That's what Jameis is programmed to do. Simeon is give me a 3-step, 5-step, and let me get the ball out on time. And he's good enough to do that. And against the Bucs, they're not very good at stopping that type of offense because they like to play. They also play a lot of cover two. They'll mix it up of single high and cover and two high safety, but they like to play a lot of zone. And with that zone, if you know that zone is coming, you can throw behind it. And those quick on-time throws also protects you up front. All of a sudden, your offensive line doesn't have to block as long because the ball's coming out on time, those type of things. So Simeon coming into this game, I said, oh shit, this isn't as bad as other people are going to say that it is, because Simeon will have success against this defense, and he certainly did. His ability to get it out on time was a huge part of them being able to win this game. Now, again, I said it on Twitter. Yes, penalties, or the refs clearly favored the Saints in penalties. I think the Bucs had like 89 yards in penalties or something like that. Let's see, 99 yards, 11 penalties for 99 yards on Tampa, 2 for 10 against New Orleans. Now, a few of those were roughing the passer penalties, which Arian said that the Bucs were warned about, and they still got 2 or 3 of those. There was one awful holding, like Cockrell ended up with a holding call towards the end of the game in the fourth quarter. That was a major deal, and ended up giving the Saints a first down on fourth down, or on a third down play that they failed. And that's fine. It absolutely was holding. The problem is that the Saints had been holding like that all game long, and none of those had been called. So here's the thing. I'm never going to be one to say that the refs gave the game throughout, like that they were rooting for one team over another or anything like that. It certainly didn't help the Bucs, but the Bucs got to beat a second string quarterback, man. Like, your defense has to be able to stop a second string quarterback. You can't have Trevor Siemian coming in and going 16 of 29 for 159 and a touchdown and not throwing any picks, and converting most of his first downs. Like, you can't do that on defense. Don't care that the refs didn't favor you. Like, stop a backup quarterback, right? And so that's as much on the Bucs, and their defense just didn't play well. When they don't get pressure, it's hard. That defense is built around pressure. When it doesn't get home, they struggle. You can't protect the secondary without pressure. And I think and that leads me to something else that I saw this week. There's a great clip of Dean Pease, and his tone isn't the best, but he has a really good point, right? A reporter asked Dean Pease, defense coordinator of the Falcons, and he says, "Hey, is there any plans on blitzing more to be able to protect this secondary? Because the secondary is not very good. So why aren't you blitzing more to help protect them?" And he goes, "Well, how does that protect them?" And the guy's like, "Well, more pressure means harder to throw the ball." And he goes, "All right, sure, that's great. So let's think about it this way." And he says this all in a much more, pissy tone than I do. But he basically goes, "All right, let's think about it this way. When a defense is in zone defense, how many people are in zone at any given point?" And the reporter goes, "Well, it depends on how many people are rushing." He goes, "All right, perfect, exactly. So if 4 people are rushing, how many people are in zone?" And he goes, "Okay, well, 7." He goes, "Okay, well, now if all of a sudden I bring another person, well, now how many are in zone?" And he goes, "Okay, well, now you got 6." He goes, "Okay, so now I've got 6 in coverage, but now I've got an extra blitzer. problem is that extra blitzer's not getting home. So now all of a sudden I got to bring another blitzer. So now I'm blitzing 6, rushing 6, which means now I've only got 5 in coverage in zone, which means they're covering bigger zones. There's bigger gaps in the secondary. So by blitzing, and that's still not getting home. So by blitzing, I'm not helping my secondary. I'm hurting my secondary. Because if I'm taking people out of coverage just to blitz, and not actually get pressure, then I'm hurting my secondary, not helping it. And that's basically what the Bucs are doing. They're blitzing, and a lot of times they're not getting home, especially against teams with good offensive lines like the Saints. And when they don't get home, it makes it much easier for a quarterback to be able to complete passes, especially when they get the ball out on time. A guy like Jameis might have held it for too long, taking a sack fumble, those type of things. Simeon, when he came in, getting the ball out on time against the defense that loves to blitz and that wanted to blitz against him because they think he's a young quarterback and a backup and not going to be able to handle it. And he came in and he played well. So it's like Dean P says, it's about getting pressure. It's not about how many guys you send. It's better if you can rush 2 and get pressure. You don't have to blitz anybody. Rush 2 and get pressure. If you can rush 3 or rush 4 and get pressure, great. But if you're sending extra guys and you're still not getting pressure, it doesn't make any sense to continue to don't blitz just to blitz. You got to figure out smarter ways. So what he said is he basically said, all right, we got to stop blitzing, and then we got to start calling a simple defense because that's what gets players playing fast and allows people to do what they're supposed to do by keeping it simple. And I thought that was a really smart, intelligent take on the situation, though he could have been much better about the way that he framed it. So, Hodzi, you're better off sending one guy your best versus one guy their worst and see if you can win. I mean, we'll talk about that in the Dallas-Minnesota game, which is up next. But it's actually a great transition into that game because there's one particular thing that we talked about in the pregame show that I was fascinated to watch, and it ended up turning out as something that was really, really interesting. So on Tampa Bay, New Orleans, New Orleans is a good football team, man. And we've talked about it. Like, they are a good football team. They just needed a little bit of identity. They're getting healthy on defense. And they were healthier along the offensive line, which is huge for this game. Still not totally there yet. Armstead ends up with an injury, which is going to be a problem for them. Whether Simeon or Taysom Hill starts next week, we'll see. Hill's still in concussion protocol, potentially gets out of concussion protocol before Sunday's game. Sean Payton already said that Hill is the guy. If he's healthy, he's the guy. But Simeon did a good job. I think Peyton has been wanting a reason to utilize Taysom Hill. I think he's fascinated with what he could potentially do. Hell of a coach game by Dennis Allen and by Sean Payton for this one. They managed it almost to perfection. And they caused Brady some problems. They got some pressure up the middle. Onyemata being in, Onyemata looked like a monster in this game, coming back from his PED suspension. He looked like he never got off the PEDs. So based on what he did, the Bucs, they were never going to get a run game going, didn't really even try. It just, even though they knew that they couldn't run the ball, they still handed it off, and it just felt like wasted plays. I think if you're gonna want to run the ball to control the game, like throw some screens to the edges, be creative in some of your play calls for some short throws that are going to get you the same thing that are going to get you 3 or 4 yards versus just trying to pound the ball up the middle with Linear Rojo. I wasn't particularly fond of all of the play calling. I thought Leftwich did okay. I think Brady needs to execute a little bit better. He missed some throws in this game. That Brady was not terrific in this particular game. So I do think that it's important to call that out. I think a lot of that had to do with the Saints. Now, look, we're not talking like, oh my God, Father Time finally caught up with him and he's horrible and we got to talk about it. Like, it's nothing like that. But he had a game not last week, but the week before where he didn't play particularly well either. They still ended up playing. They still ended up winning. I think it might even been the Bears game. but he missed some throws. He missed quite a few throws. And I said it early on in the game, and they still ended up winning. Like he figured it out. But against good teams, he's going to have to be pretty on point. He's lucky that he's got the weapons that he does. The team was built that way for a specific reason, and he's got a huge arsenal at his disposal. So Bucks are going to be fine. Like, I'm not knocking them off the pedestal of still being, a Super Bowl contender or anything like that. But I do think that this shows some gaps in the armor going forward for them. And I think it also shows that New Orleans is I think they're going to be able to get around a lot of the things that people see as gaps in their armor as well. All right. Cowboys Vikings. So we talked about pressure and how with the Saints and Tampa Bay, and how Dean Pease, the defense coordinator of the Falcons, framed up how pressure works and blitzing works, right? And one of the things that we talked about last week in the pregame show was that I was fascinated on was how does Minnesota, and specifically Mike Zimmer, attack the protections of the Dallas Cowboys. So what does that mean to attack the protections? So basically, every offensive line has rules of if they get certain looks by a defense based on certain plays, certain protections, they will slide left, they'll slide right, they'll double team, they'll do different things. And it also identifies what the running back or the tight end in that protection is supposed to do as well. Mike Zimmer is one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL at identifying what those protections are, what those rules of protections are by an offensive line, and using them against them. And there was a great example of Cooper Rush was in shotgun, and he had Ezekiel Elliott to his right, and he identified a protection that basically slid the Cowboys slid their protection to the right on the pass, and he knew what their protection was going to be, and he sent a blitzer in the A gap from the opposite side. It might have been the B gap from the opposite side, because he knew that they were going to be there. Now, when you know that they're going to slide right, if an offense is going to slide right, you want to blitz off of the left side, because if they're moving this way, you want to blitz where a guy isn't, right? Zimmer knew it so well that he actually knew that the left tackle goes this way, left guard goes this way. So they're both now here, and then center, right guard, and right tackle all go this way. So you've got right side going this way, left side going this way. He brings a guy right through that gap that they left. And he knew that with Ezekiel Elliott on the right side and bringing that blitzer through the A gap on the left side makes it harder for Zeke to come across the face after the snap to be able to get to the guy that he's defending or that he's supposed to be blocking. Zeke initially gets there on the play and gets the first hit, but because he's just trying to get into position as the contact is coming, he's not able to get a full-on block. And then I forget, it might have been Barr, but whoever it is ends up getting to the quarterback and sacking him on that particular play. And it was just a great example of how Zimmer can identify the protections and get a free rusher in there. And if he can identify it in what's going to happen, then he knows exactly what to call in those situations. Thought it was fascinating. It wasn't something that he was particularly successful at all day long, but there were opportunities. Let's see. Cooper Rush ended up with 3 sacks for 19 yards. That's a pretty good outcome for Zimmer and his defense. Problem is that Cooper Rush was also 24-40 for 325 and 2 touchdowns as well. Rush played a solid game for a backup, right? Like it's not a huge game for a starter, but that is a good enough game. And that's all that the Cowboys were trying to get out of this. Good enough to win. They weren't playing to blow out the Vikings. They were planning on winning this game. Just give me out of here with a W and we're okay. Thought they called a really good game for that. Again, another Zeke line where they're like, hey, we're going to run you, and you may not have the best game, but we're going to keep giving you the football. 16 for 50, not a particularly great line. Now, there was one massive play for Zeke Elliott. So at the end of towards the end of the game, it's 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, something like that. And Zeke ends up getting a short pass from Cooper Rush, and he has two guys right near him as he catches the ball, about 3-4 yards past the line of scrimmage, and still has a good 8 yards to go. And somehow he squirts through and squeezes through the narrowest of gaps of these two would-be defenders and gets past the sticks and gets the first down on 3rd down. At an incredible play on Zeke's part, and a huge play in the outcome of this game. Like, that basically sealed the game for the Cowboys. Instead of them kicking a field goal, they end up being able to punch it in from there. Huge play. Can't overstate. And it was a super impressive play, because it was one of those plays where it's just like, as soon as he caught it, you're like, okay, play's over. He's getting tackled. No shot he makes it through this. And then somehow, like, nobody even lays a finger on him or barely even touches him. And it's just like, what happened? Like a glitch in the matrix or something, right? For him to be able to get that. So impressive play from him. The Vikings continued to play to the level of their opponent. If it's a good team, they're going to play up. If it's a bad team, they're going to play down. Cousins throws 35 times for 85 yards. Like, they need to start pushing the ball down the field more. You cannot have that type of an offense and be that conservative as a passer. Just not a great way to run an offense in today's NFL. Again, we're talking about how teams love to play a ton of too high against these big play offenses, and they're stopping that particular play. Teams don't have to do that against Kirk Cousins. You can challenge up front, and especially with a offense that loves to run the ball with Dalvin Cook and Alex Madison. They need to be able to stretch the field to force defenses to respect that deep ball. And oh, by the way, they have Adam Thielen and Jefferson and KJ Osborne, who can get open deep, and put some pressure on some safeties in the defense. And they've got to get out of it. There's no reason for them to play the offense the way that they do. And I don't understand why they don't try that more often, because it's not like they can't do it. Cousins can make those throws. They're not calling the plays, and Cousins doesn't seem to have the inclination to make those throws. So really, just disappointing show for them. Trayvon Diggs ends up on Jefferson pretty much the entire day. Ends up with only 2 catches for 21 yards. Dalvin Cook, 18 of 78. Alex Madison, 2 for 5. Tyler Conklin ends up 5 for 57. Thielen was the one that ends up benefiting from Jefferson taking Trayvon Diggs. And Thielen ends up with 6 for 78 and a touchdown. So Randy Gregory had a really good day. Man, the defensive line for the Cowboys pretty much owned the entire game. Gregory, huge game. Micah Parsons, huge. And here's the thing. What I noticed about this particular game is Micah Parsons was really good on the edge in terms of figuring out, hey, they're going to, instead of me just running to the quarterback blindly and letting them take me out of the play, how about I would just run into the flat and hit the running back? Or hit whoever it is that's running out there, whether it's a screen or whatever it is. He did a really good job of getting to those guys. Had a ton of tackles just on those type of plays. QB hit, like, really good game for Micah Parsons as well. Overall, like, I think this Cowboys defense is something that needs to be respected. I don't think they're overwhelmingly good, but you definitely need to respect what they can do well. Again, Vikings continue to play the level. I'm so disappointed in them, because they need to be able to stretch the field. I'm still not sold on their cornerbacks. Breland has played better the last few games, but he's still a guy that I feel like can be attacked by the right team with the right play calling, right offense, right quarterback, right coordinator, those type of things. But Minnesota's not not that team right now. So we'll see how that goes in future weeks. What else? I mean, got to mention Cooper Rush, obviously filling in. He did a fine job, did an okay job. He got the ball to his playmakers, which is the important part, right? When you've got CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, get the ball to them and let them be great. Amari 8 for 122 and a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb 6 for 112. Huge. Basically, nobody else did anything else. Dalton Schultz 2 catches, 11 yards. Noah Brown 1 catch, 7 yards. We talked about Zeke 16 for 50. Tony Pollard 7 for 26. He did have a few checkdowns. Hey, can we talk about Cedric Wilson did have 3 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown, which is awesome. He's shown up as a third receiver for them. That's massive as they've been without Michael Gallup. But the play to me, the one thing that sticks out, the one play out of this entire game, which was a very good game, by the way, the one play that sticks out to me, Cedric Wilson's throw was an absolute dime. So it was an end around or a reverse or something, and Cedric Wilson gets it, and he's rolling out to the right, and he's got a little bit of pressure, and you're like, oh, it's just going to be, he's got to just throw this away. And he just takes off and just rips it. And he threw a better spiral than Peyton Manning has ever thought about throwing. And it is an absolute dime down the field while he's throwing it on the run. And it was beautiful. And it was a lot of fun to watch. And I wish they would run that play way more often. But it was the one play that sticks out for this game. So anyways, Cowboys end up getting a close win. Vikings end up getting the push. Actually, this was the line. Sorry. This was the line that Dallas was initially favored in, and then it moved to the Vikings being favored, and that made no sense whatsoever to me. I took it on Sunday morning at 2.5. I think it ended up at like Dallas +4 or something like that by game time because Dak was out. So yeah, Dallas by 4 in this game was a very, very nice gift from Vegas. Because Dallas, like I said, when Dak was out, it's not that the Cowboys couldn't win. I just thought that they needed to figure out a different way to win. Now, it ended up being, again, right outcome, wrong process to get there. But I didn't think that I thought that they would need to change their offense, but they could still win if they changed their offense. I thought they would go more run heavy. They did consistently go to the run. I will give them that, but they just didn't change it up in terms of aggressiveness. So, that's that one. Congrats to the Cowboys, man. 6-1. It's gonna be interesting to put them in, figure out where they go in their respective tier whenever we get to tiers in a second. So, final game of the week, and we'll probably spend. Let's see, it's 9:30. Yeah, we'll get done in the next 30 minutes. So final game of the week, last night's game, Giants and KC. Mahomes 29-48, 275, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 fumble. Hill had 12 catches on 18 targets. That's a huge amount of targets. 94 yards and a TD. His longest of the night was only 15 yards. Not what you would expect from a Tyreek Hill. By those numbers, you'd think that he was a possession receiver. Kelsey only had 4 catches for 27 yards. Darrell Williams, Derek Gore split carries. Gore had 11 carries, 48 yards and a TD. Williams had 13 for 49. He did add 6 catches for 61 yards, so used a little bit more in the pass game. Those stats all indicate that Kansas City was a little more patient on offense, but it still didn't turn out that great for him. Now, I will say KC came out with patience. They moved the ball, a bunch of short passes and runs early on, not afraid to take what the defense gives them. 13-play drive, moves them all the way down the field, puts them into TD range, and then all of a sudden, guess what happens? The same thing that we've been talking about on this show for the last month. What did we talk about specifically last week and how a lot of these turnovers are happening for Mahomes? They bounce off of the receiver's hands, pop up in the air, and somebody else on the other team comes down with them. And guess what happens? Mahomes threw it to, I think it was either Josh Gordon or Pringle. I will say, I think Gordon was the one that got the target, but I actually think in watching the play back, I think Pringle was actually who Mahomes was throwing to. Gordon just happened to be there, but it goes through Gordon's hands basically, off of Pringle's face mask, and then straight up to the air. And then Julian Love ends up coming down with it. They were both right there in terms of being able to catch it. Either one of them couldn't. Like, this is the epitome of what we've been talking about with Mahomes. And here's the thing: Mahomes actually makes a jump pass here. So people are going to say, well, he's pushing it and forcing it too hard. But the thing is two receivers had a shot at this. And it's not like either of them were particularly well covered. Just neither one of them were really paying attention or focused. Neither one comes up with the TD. Instead, it's a pick. Is there traffic? Yeah, a little bit of traffic, but they're not particularly well covered. Is it a bad throw? Nope. Is it unlucky? Hell yes. Absolutely. And it's kind of funny because as if the luck gods felt bad for that throw on Mahomes. The Giants have literally next play they run a short run, and then Daniel Jones throws it right back to the Chiefs. Willie Gay did a great job of reading the Jones's eyes and just following the slant and getting underneath of it. It looked like the ball was intended to him. Like, he just right there, no problem. And then this time Mahomes, it's funny because Mahomes does his hops around the pocket and then throws to Tyreek Hill, who comes up with it. It was a good throw, low throw to Hill in the back of the end zone. Smart play. I don't think here's the thing. I don't expect Mahomes. It's so funny because in watching that game back over today, I thought that Mahomes, after that first interception, was going to go, that's it. I'm not testing I'm not throwing this to anybody but Hill or Kelsey in the red zone anymore. You guys none of you other disasters of wide receivers are going to get a shot at this. And it ended up playing out on the last one when he had a guy coming on the very last play that he ended up taking a sack on, but it ended up being an important play because it ended up keeping them from allowing them to kick the field goal and run some time off the clock. But he basically says there's a guy wide open running across his face, and he's like, nope, I'm not throwing it to you. I think it might have even been Kelsey. But he's like, yeah, I'm not throwing it. Like, he got a little bit gun shy. Now, I will say at times he was not patient throughout the game. And this is something like, so I asked the question today on Twitter. Who was Mahomes who does Mahomes target when interceptions happen? Like, who are those targets going to, and how many turnovers does he have when targeting each receiver? And the thought behind that was that even with Kelsey and Hill receiving a heavy percentage of targets, most of the interceptions are occurring when targeting other receivers like Pringle or Gordon. And it turns out that that theory is half true. So 4 of Mahomes' 10 interceptions have occurred when he's targeting Kelsey. And that makes sense. And we'll talk about that in a second. So 4 to Kelsey, 2 have occurred when targeting Hill, 2 targeting Josh Gordon. Though I'd argue that one of those, the one attributed to targeting Josh Gordon last night, was actually to Pringle. But either way, so 2 to Gordon, 1 to Hardman, and then 1 to Marcus Kemp, which was in LA when Kemp was going across the middle, and it was a little bit behind, but it goes off of his hands and ends up with an Asante Samuel diving interception. And I think that's the key thing here, is that some of these throws haven't been as precise as Mahomes would normally be, and I think that's causing some of these balls to go off of their hands. But so why does it make sense that Kelsey has the most interceptions when targeted? Well, there's 2 things. Obviously, one, he's heavily targeted. So Hill leads the team with 28% of targets. Kelsey is second with 22% of targets. Second, Kelsey's targets, as most tight end targets are, tend to be more over the middle, which can lead to more catches or non-catches in this instance, since we're discussing interceptions in traffic than other receivers. And we talked about it on past shows and earlier tonight. When there's too high and you're playing either zone or man under it, there's a lot more traffic in the middle of the field. When there's traffic there, there's more bodies around, more likely to get tipped. And when it does get tipped and the ball goes in the air, more likely that somebody is to come down with it from the other team versus it actually just falling to the ground. And the other thing is Kelsey's not getting as many of those like bubble screens and fly sweeps that count as passes and targets to Hill either. So when he gets a higher percentage of targets than other receivers, most of his targets are in the middle of the field in traffic, and he's targeted mostly downfield, not on those screens. There's a logical explanation as to why he would end up having the most interceptions when being targeted by Mahomes. So totally makes sense. I thought that was really a really interesting conversation, and something that you can draw something out of and actually begin to game plan around. But overall, it goes exactly what goes back to exactly what we talked about for the Chiefs. They have to be patient. They have to find the run game. They have to realize that with the way that defenses are playing them, they're not going to blow out a ton of teams out. By teams playing this, it effectively removes their ability to go downfield and to stretch the game or to stretch the field. And it's going to continue to be a problem for them. And the other thing is their defense isn't creating the turnovers that they have in the past. And with their defense being bad and them not being able to score quickly, it kind of compounds on itself, and it means they're going to have to reimagine their offense. Their offense is built on go routes and streaks and large chunk plays to Kelsey and Hill. And when those are taken away and you don't have a defense to be able to protect yourself on the other side of the ball, now you got to start to reconsider what your offense looks like. And they haven't done it yet, but I think they're starting to get there. And I definitely think that by the time the bye week is over, I think that's definitely when they will have it figured out by that time. So the goal now, we're so used to seeing the Chiefs win by 30, 40 points, right? And just put up huge numbers and big plays on everybody that we're not used to, and they're not used to now having to win with small ball and quick game and run game and things like that. And their defense is bad enough that even bad teams like the Giants are going to come in and play with the Chiefs. And the goal is now not to win by 30 or 40, but to just win the game. And they're going to have to figure out how to win close games. Like you come in and you win, 17-14 against against teams, and that's fine. Like winning a game is winning a game, and people are just going to have to come to terms with that's how the Chiefs are going to have to win. A couple other notes. So Daniel Jones, let's see. I thought the Giants did a good job last night of using screens and dumps to get the yards when they needed. When the Chiefs play that man coverage that they like, it opens up the yards after catch, and the Giants used that aspect well last night. I do think the Giants won the line of scrimmage last night on offense, and that's been a problem for the Chiefs all season. Again, probably why they added Ingram, why they're going to end up moving Chris Jones back inside once Ingram comes along. And Ingram's going to play immediately. He's going to come in and he's going to start playing immediately. They're not going to put him in coverage as much as the Steelers did. He's there for one reason: get to the quarterback. Let's see. Giants played smart defense, same way that everyone else has played Mahomes. They played that too deep, take away the big stuff. Mahomes' first completion past 10 yards didn't come until 4 minutes left in the third quarter. Everything that he threw, every pass that he completed was short of 10 yards last night until late in the third quarter, almost fourth quarter. Daniel Jones had a little smoke route that he threw that should have been a pick six to I think it was Tony, but Snead fell down on the perimeter. And it's funny because instead of a pick six, the Giants get a go-ahead TD and open the fourth quarter to make it a 17-14 game. And then a Giants personal foul helps put the Chiefs in field goal range. And then on 3rd and 9, Mahomes fumbles. And the Chiefs are incredibly lucky that an offensive lineman falls on it, which allows them to kick the game-tying field goal, make it 17-17. If that's a pick six, if Snead doesn't fall down and that's a pick six, I think it changes the complexion of this game and probably the narrative of this game, right? And again, it goes back to one or two plays in every game end up dictating the outcome and ultimately the narrative of what happens in and outside of that game. Giants do get the ball back, start moving it, and Jones barely missed Slayton. Again, small play, but Jones barely missed Slayton deep, and that might have ended the game because Slayton had his guy beat, and potentially it ends up being a touchdown if he can connect. Slayton was held on the play, and it's probably why Slayton couldn't actually get to the ball because it was just barely overthrown. So that little bit of a hold actually might have won the game for the Chiefs. Giants can't convert after the missed opportunity. Chiefs get 5 minutes, get the ball back with 5 minutes, try to get a field goal to win it. That seems like a pretty good opportunity for them. I loved how the Chiefs used Hardman last night. I think he's so dynamic with the ball in his hand. Like he looks so fast and so explosive with the ball in his hands. And early on, they called some screens, some flat sweeps for him that traditionally would have gone to Hill, and Hardman did a great job with him. He had a huge catch on the final drive to get the Chiefs deep into field goal range. And then there was a small play, but it's 3rd and goal from the 8, and talked a little bit about it on Twitter today, but it's 3rd and goal from the 8, and it's just past the 2-minute warning. Giants don't have any more timeouts left. Mahomes drops back to pass. Now, he doesn't see what he wants to see. And there are people that are posting this as this is Patrick Mahomes leaving a clean pocket. It absolutely was Patrick Mahomes leaving a clean pocket. Now, in this particular situation, I think Patrick had it in his head of it's 100% throw or nothing. And if it's not 1000% an easy throw and catch, do not throw it. Take a sack, run the ball, stay in bounds, let the clock run. Because if you go down with the ball in your hand, then it ends up running the clock. And now once we kick this very short field goal, the Giants are going to have a minute or so left to be able to get the ball back. I think that's what Mahomes had in his head. Everybody else seems to think that Mahomes just left a clean pocket. And yes, there was a guy running across. I think it was Kelsey. If I didn't go back and look at the all 22, but he had decided pre-snap he was not going to throw that ball, unless the perfect opportunity presented itself. And it may have been that they may have told him in his ear, "Do not throw this. Your job is to go down. Either run it in or don't do anything at all." But he effectively takes a sack, like he scrambled out to his left a little bit, effectively takes a short sack, keeps the clock running, gives KC a good chance at the game-winning field goal. Giants are out of timeouts. Final kick went through with 1:08 left. Giants can't get anything going, and that's the ball game. Like the Giants basically, I think they went sack, and then 0 for 0 for on passing, if I remember correctly, something like that. Or maybe they were sacked on 2nd down, but it just they got absolutely zero going on offense on that last drive. I think the thing to take away from this game is the days of KC blowing teams out is over. Their goal is to win, not to win by 40 points. The defense isn't good. The offense is going to have to play patient. And against bad teams like the Giants, they're going to be fine. They're going to be able to win that way. Against good teams, they're going to have to find ways to win. And I just don't know that they're there yet. All right. Is that everything? Let's see. All right, that is everything. That is all of my notes. That is Giants, Chiefs, all the games from this week. So again, we'll call it technically 8-6. I want to call it 9-6 because we picked the Rams game at 14.5 on Thursday night. Should get credit for that. Theoretically, it should be 9-6. But either way, solid week, would have win. Hard to pick every game every week, um, but we're winning when we do, picking it every game. So been a lot of fun. Learned a lot this week about a few different teams. Still feel like I'm not quite there yet on a couple of different teams, and understanding what else they're in what they want to do and how they want to play. But I do think we're getting better and better at calling some of these matchups, even though some of the results aren't coming out exactly the way that we thought. I think we're calling a lot of the game plans, a lot of the matchups pretty much perfectly. So, let us see here. Let me flip screens. All right, so it is tiers time. So for any of you guys that haven't been here, at the end of every recap show, we basically say, hey, at the end of this week, what does it look like for all of the teams in the NFL? Where do they sit? Where should we have them ranked? And I think I'm going to change a little bit about how we do this from week to week now, because this has been a fun little add to the stream lately, and I want to get into this. And let me see. Let me pull it up here. Okay. So this is how we've ranked everyone. This is how we ranked them last week. So this is where we left off after week 7. And for me, I'm curious as to how we want to move these every single week. What do we learn? What do we not learn? Who needs to move up and down tiers, and who needs to move without tiers, because we're ranking them inside the tiers as well. So for me, so this right here, this is how we finished last week. And I think what I want to do go from now on is my goal is that this theoretically should be how the end of season ends up, right? I don't want to make very many changes to this every week. Hopefully I come back to this next week and I go, yep, perfect. Want to leave it that way. However, that's never going to be the case. We're always going to want to move some people around. So the goal is not just to project, like if we want to rank this by records, fantastic. Our goal is to see through the records and see who's actually good, who's actually bad, and rank them based on where they're going to end up by the end of the year. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that so far, but there are definitely some teams that I want to move around this week. So let's start at the bottom. And so typically what we do is we start at the bottom and work our way up. But we'll also get to the top and work our way to the middle, because the middle's the hard part. Like these three, the strong playoff team, wild cardish, and middle of the pack, those tend to be our hardest ones to get done. So let's start at the bottom. So again, Lions are worst. Texans, I think we got to move the Jets up this week. And we got to move the Jags down. I don't know. Browns, Money My, welcome in. So the Browns, we thought last week they were on the edge of a strong playoff team. There's a lot of people that said, hey, they should probably be wild cardish. And I said, I still think that they're capable of doing this. Now, if they end up pulling out a win against the Steelers this week, they're probably still sitting on strong playoff team, because now instead of being 4-4, they're 5-3. And looking pretty good in the AFC North and still looking like a pretty strong contender. So that's why they're at the bottom of being a strong playoff team. Obviously, they probably fall down here at this point, somewhere in this area. So we'll leave them here for now, but we'll get to them in a second. Money My. But welcome in. Welcome in. Good question. All right, so we got Lions is the worst team in the NFL. Texans is the second worst. And you could do this, whatever. It's all the same. Lions are over. You got to leave them there for now. I don't know who's worse, Jags or Dolphins. I'm probably going to go Jags for now, especially with James Robinson being on the bench. And then Dolphins, I still think Jets are a bad team. Hey, they got to win against the Bengals. Fantastic. Good for them. Doesn't change my mind about who they are at their core. No shot. Washington. The only question is like, so my rule is since it's a top 5 draft pick, we can't have 5 down here. We got to put teams in bad, not down in. But you could totally sell me on putting Washington down here. and maybe even moving the Jets up. But I'm going to leave Washington right in very, very bad for right now, at the bottom of the bad section. Eagles, we put them down here, and we knew that they were going to beat the Lions. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to move them up because the Falcons lost. I still think this is a fair assessment. I'm ready to move the Broncos down to here. I'm going to give them here. Look, for me, I know the Broncos won this week, but nothing about the Broncos told me that hey, this is a good team. You beat a bad Washington team and you didn't beat them by very much. So that for me is why I can go ahead and drop them down into bad. Bears, again, this feels about right. Middle of the pack, probably bottom middle of the pack. Panthers, 49ers, still not there on them yet. Steelers, not sure. This feels about right. Seahawks, kind of Seahawks end up posting a huge game this week, but again, I still don't think I see them as anything bigger than middle of the pack, especially right now. Maybe I start moving them up in a week or two, whenever. And so they've got a bye week this week. 2 weeks they play. In a couple of weeks they play who do they play? Arizona in 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. No, they play Packers and then Arizona, I believe. So I'm gonna leave them here because I don't know that they get out of the middle of the pack. Colts still feel like middle of the pack. They end up losing to the Titans. Had a shot to win that game. I just don't think they're there yet. Patriots, top of the middle of the pack. Yeah, I feel like we're pretty spot on from where we were last week. Just a couple of tweaks so far. KC, wildcardish. I'm still gonna leave them here. They didn't look great against the Giants, but I'm still gonna leave them here because I think they don't have the hardest of schedules outside of the AFC West, and I still think they're good enough to figure it out. I think coming out of that bye, when they do get to their bye week and coming out of it, I think they're going to be better. I like the trade for Melvin Ingram. That's definitely going to help push. It's going to push Chris Jones back inside, let him be dominant inside, Ingram dominant on the outside. Maybe not dominant, but a good player on the outside. So I still want them there. Vikings, yeah, it still feels right. I think we have to move. We've got to move the Saints up. The Bengals, Titans, and Saints all. I think I'm gonna move. I gotta move Cleveland here. It's tough. I don't want to overreact to one single week, right? Because that's not the goal here. The goal here is to pick something that we don't have to change very much from week to week. We should go from this week to next week and make like 1, 2, 3 changes and not have to change a ton, because this is how teams are supposed to be. Not based on what the record is right now. Not overreacting to their game this week. Because, I mean, some teams will end up winning. Eagles had a huge win, but so what? No big deal. They had a huge win over the Lions. Not a big deal. Cleveland should still be a strong playoff team. They're 4-4, right? And Bengals are what? 6-2. I can't consciously put them over the Bengals right now, and I don't think the Bengals are a strong playoff team. And there's no telling what that ends up being. The Tennessee, I cannot move out of wild cardish because without Derrick Henry, they're wild cardish at best, and I'm actually tempted to move them down. Tempted to move them down right now. Saints. Saints are wild cardish to me. Simply, if they had a quarterback, I would put them here. You think Saints up, Browns down is the only move, hot seat. So I could justify this. I could justify moving Saints up here. The problem is I don't know who they are without a quarterback. Without Jameis, how many teams can they realistically beat? I mean, theoretically, they just beat actually they just beat the Bucks, right? So if the Saints get Rivers, are they a strong playoff team, Gabe? I mean, it depends on what version of Rivers they get. He wasn't a bad player in Indy, but I mean, I think it better. I think they teeter. I don't know that there's anything that could have me move the Saints from here to up here. There's a lot of people that don't like me having the Raiders in strong playoff team, but I still think that overall this is a good football team. Hodzi, leave them where they are. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave them on wild card. I still don't think they're there yet. I think they have a great defensive line, great offensive line. I think they have Alvin Kamara obviously helps. It's huge. They have solid secondary, solid linebackers. Like their whole defense is good. I just don't, and their offensive line is good enough. I just don't know. Their offensive line is good. I just don't know if they're good enough at wide receiver and at quarterback for me to justify them as a strong playoff team. Raiders. I'm gonna leave them here. I'm a higher believer in the Raiders than everybody else is. Everybody else thinks that they're a joke. Totally understand why. I don't disagree with that at all. I think Pac's got to move up after beating Arizona. And I feel like these are still there. I'm not overreacting to the Pats beating the Chargers. Old coach beating, a young coach and a rookie quarterback. Not a surprise with Belichick at all. I think that's a tough matchup for them. I think the Chargers probably should have. I do wonder, however, if the Chargers are going to have a problem with that run defense. Could potentially be a problem for them. Baltimore, bye week, good week for them, right? So Bengals lose, Browns lose. Steelers end up winning, but who cares? Steelers are probably not the team that they're concerned about right now. So good week for them, even though they didn't play. Money my, I will never believe the Packers hype after the past 2 years. Fair. But remember, if there's a fourth down call and Aaron Rodgers connects a pass against the Bucks to score a touchdown instead of them kicking a field goal, the whole narrative changes. And that's what we've talked about all night is like, let's get away from what the narratives are of everybody else. Let's look at everything in context and talk about where teams really are. Any of these teams could win any of these top 6 teams could win this year. I would say any of the top 9, and even to a degree, even anything from wild cardish up have a chance at winning because you got to get a little bit lucky. And I saw somebody else talking about this on Twitter earlier of trading for single individual players to try to win a Super Bowl is probably not the best way to go about it, because basically you're saying, hey, I'm all in it for this year. But the reality is that you're going to need some breaks to fall your way. The Bucs certainly had them last year. The fumble by the Saints last year in the fourth quarter that allowed them to come back and get back into the game. Saints are about to put it away, and then they fumbled the ball away. The third down, fourth down that the Packers didn't go for it, and ended up kicking a field goal. That helps them out. They just happened to get Vita Vea back just in time for the playoffs. Like, they had a lot of things go their way. They were pretty healthy throughout the playoffs. There's some other teams that were banged up. Chiefs weren't totally healthy. So you got to get some luck in there too. So the idea is just to be good enough to get into the playoffs and be strong and hopefully have, home field advantage. So you're playing at home. Again, play the probabilities, and then maybe you get lucky. So I'm kind of liking where these teams are at. I could argue KC over Minnesota. I could argue Browns over Bengals. I think these are kind of where they need to be. I'm higher on Oakland. Oh my gosh, put $1 in the jar. I'm higher on Las Vegas than most people are. I still think Chargers are a strong playoff team, or at least will be as the end of the year comes around. I could have seen them trading for like somebody to help them with some run defense. That would have been useful. Um, Pretty banged up at cornerback. Had some problems at cornerback this week, which could be an issue. Sorry. Um, Baltimore definitely still a strong playoff team. I don't know if I'm going to put them in contender. Green Bay is definitely there. Buffalo's definitely there. Probably going to move Cowboys over Bucks after this week. Rams over Cardinals. Um, I just think the Rams are overall a better team right now. Um, but it's like 1A and 1B, and then 2A and 2B between Cowboys and Bucks. Bills still seem like the team in the AFC to beat for me. And Green Bay is definitely a contender. I just don't know where they should go along this. I don't think their defense is much better than the Bucks, and I don't think their offense is as good as the Bucks. Same for the Cowboys, same for the Cardinals, same for the Rams. They're just not there yet. I think Buffalo is a more complete team than Green Bay. NFC is much clearer than AFC. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's why like my thing says tough NFC, because I feel like there are a lot of really good teams in the NFC, but the AFC is so muddy. It's super muddy and messy right now. And it's going to be fun to watch it. Like I feel like the AFC teams are all going to flip by the time this is all done. But I feel like the NFC teams we've probably got a pretty good read on. And I could be totally wrong on that. But I feel like this is good. All right, where are the problems at? What's wrong? What's wrong with this picture? What did we get wrong? I remember last week we had people were telling me to flip Carolina and Atlanta, and I said, "Nah, I think Carolina's going to win that game, and we're still going to see that Atlanta's not very good." Um, does the Rams versus Arizona game not play into ranking when you're ranking the 1A versus 1B? I'm obviously biased in this situation. So it doesn't. And the reason for that is because it's not about them playing each other. It's about where do they finish at the end of the year. And I think overall, the Rams are a better team, but I think that was a pretty positive matchup for the Cardinals in that particular game. It's kind of like Bengals Ravens, right? We just watched the Bengals trounce the Ravens. Do I think the Bengals are actually a better team overall than the Ravens? No. I think they came in with the right game plan, managed the matchups, managed the game and the strategy, and executed better in that particular game. Overall, I don't think the Bengals are a better team or finish better than the Ravens. And I think you kind of saw that play out with them lose to the Jets this week. So isn't Arizona's schedule easier than the Rams? Yeah, so that's the one thing I don't have the time to take into account for this game is if I'm looking at the schedules, I should be putting the Bucks and the Bills probably closer to the top because they have one of the easiest schedules in the like if they didn't play each other, if the Bucks and the Bills didn't play each other later in the season, they would probably have the easiest schedule in the NFL. But because both of those teams are really, really good and play each other at one time, and they still probably have close to the easiest schedules. So it's the one thing I can't take into account without going through every single team schedule for the rest of the year. Now, maybe whenever we get into like the last 4 weeks of the season, maybe we'll start considering that. All right, what else? Anybody else? Any lurkers in the chat? Would love to hear from you guys. I want to know what I did wrong here. Because I always take this, screenshot it, and post it after we're done. Oh, a little bit too far. And post it after we're done. Because I like to see what everybody. And the thing is I've watched this where I've posted this on Twitter and been fully prepared to just take the heat. And pretty much everybody's like, yeah, it makes sense. And I will, again, probably get the third degree simply because trying to square this up simply because I have the Raiders too high. Arizona still has Rams, Dallas, Seattle ×2 on the schedule. Yeah, that's painful. Not sure it's easier. Chargers don't move down. I mean out of the AFC, out of the AFC, like who Here's the thing: is if I move the Chargers down, I have to move the Raiders down, probably. Right, to me, because I feel like they're probably on the same level, which isn't the worst thing. Let's see. Let me look at this. So actually, so the Titans are the 1 seed. In the AFC, Titans are the 1 seed. Raiders are the 2. Ravens are the 3. Bills are the 4. Bengals, Steelers, Chargers round out 5, 6, and 7. So technically, this has Raiders as the 2 seed, Chargers as a 7. Money My, do you think, is it My or Mall? It might be. I think it's Mall. I'm sorry. I've been calling you the wrong time. So Money, do you think, yeah, it's Money Mall. My bad. Do you think that the Raiders deserve to be a strong playoff team and not the Chargers? Hodzy, maybe the Vikings up, but they play up and down the competition. And I'm not sure how much I trust Kirk. It would only be within the tier though. Yeah, so that's the thing for me is the KFC or KFC, the KC, the Vikings, the Browns, the Bengals, and the Titans. I could take any 5 of these teams and flip them in any different direction right now. You could convince me that any of those teams deserve to be wild cardish and in any, because I mean the Bengals beat the Ravens and then they lost to the Jets. Should they have lost to the Jets? Probably not. But the Titans have a huge question mark without Derrick Henry. Bengals not sure of that defense. Browns not sure if they can survive without a strong running game. If teams can key on their running game, it lessens what the Browns can do. Myles Garrett was in the backfield all day on Sunday, and they still ended up having struggles with the Steelers. And then the Vikings, they played well against, or they played up to the Cowboys, but I mean, I don't know what they're going to be on a week-to-week basis. And then KC, they've got a big hole to climb out of, right? So KC right now, they're 4-4. I mean, technically they go 5-4. They could potentially start to climb back into the wild cardish, and they may start climbing back into the, into the strong playoff team. But we're not there yet. And I can't right now until I see signs of them changing what they're doing on defense. More signs of what they're doing on defense. I think Ingram is going to be a pretty big thing for them. And then they've got to retool, reimagine what their offense is. Money, no, AFC is just confusing, especially with Derrick Henry getting hurt. I wouldn't be surprised if KC still finds a way to the AFC Championship game. Yeah, that's the thing for me. Money is like you could convince me that KC belongs up here, because while I don't think they're going to be winning by 30 points anymore, I do think that they have the ability to win games. And again, I'm not going to check schedules on this, but I do think that they have the ability to kind of climb back. I do think they climb back in the wild card. Hell, they're only a game out of the wild card now. They're behind the Patriots, ahead of the Browns and Broncos. So they're 9th seed right now. And behind them is Browns, Broncos, Colts. They still feel like a playoff team to me. Steelers are ahead of them. Steelers probably fall out. Bengals could potentially fall out. I mean, Raiders are number 2 seed and could potentially fall out, especially if they drop a couple wins against the Raiders. So yeah, the AFC West is going to be the big question mark, because right now you've got the Raiders, the Chargers, the Chiefs, and the Broncos. Well, Broncos are probably out of it at 4-4, but Chiefs are still 4-4. So yeah, you could totally. Money, thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for hanging out. Man, I think this is it, guys. I don't think I can. I don't think that I can change anything else for this right now. My question is do I want to leave? Am I ballsy enough to put KC up here to just go ahead and call it? Because here's the thing: is I think KC is there eventually. I just don't know for sure. And there's a lot of people after last night that are gonna be like, "Oh, they just barely beat the Giants." Yeah, exactly. That's how they're gonna have to win games, even against bad teams. All right, I'll leave them there. I'll leave them at the bottom of wild cardish for now, because that's where they're at for now. But I do think that they would be there. I'm not ready to, no, I wouldn't move KC up here. No. I couldn't do that, Hodsy. Not yet. If they show me something, maybe. You could convince me here. You could convince me that they're actually better than the Browns. I mean, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I still like them better than. I mean, technically, they're higher. They're a higher seed than the Browns. But that's also not what I'm looking for. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna move them ahead of the Browns. Because I still think that they're good. I think that they've been incredibly unfortunate. I think that Andy Reid has a knack for getting things right after the bye week. I think they're eventually going to end up here. Screw it. We'll call it. We'll move them up there. All right. So based on seeds, how do we align? So Titans are number one. We've got in the AFC. We've got them there. But with Derrick Henry out, there's definitely concerns. Raiders are number two. Okay, one of the stronger teams. Ravens and Bills up here. And then we've got Bengals. We've got Steelers down here in the middle of the pack. There's no shot I'm putting Steelers into wild cardish. I just don't believe in them yet. I don't think that defense is all that great. I think they're smart in how they play, but I don't think they're all that great. And I just don't trust Big Ben on much of that. And then Chargers. Yeah, I still like Chargers as a strong playoff team. They're on the edge. Them and the Raiders are on the edge. They could totally move down. And then I've got Patriots, Chiefs, Browns. Chiefs, Browns. I'm not there on the Patriots. I just don't think their talent's that much. They could potentially switch Pats and Vikes money. I'm not there on the Pats, man. I don't think they're particularly talented. Here's the thing. Bill Belichick, best coach of all time. I don't care if he had Brady and everybody thinks that Brady was his edge now that Brady's left. I do think that Belichick is the best coach of all time still. And that he will, I mean, he showed it. I don't think that this is a particularly talented team, especially in the secondary, but they've looked better than they should have just based on some of the game plans that they put together. When you can hold the Bucks and Cowboys to lower point totals than they've had all season, that's impressive. They are not, I can tell you, they are not that talented on defense to be able to do that. But they have good game plans to do that. So again, Bucks in the rain, I get it, but they would have done that anyways. Yeah, I'm gonna roll with this. I could totally see the Vikings going down to middle of the pack and Patriots coming up. I'm just not there yet. Because again, I don't think the Patriots are there. Everybody's raving about Mac Jones. I think he's done all right. I think he's played okay. I don't think he's been phenomenal. For a rookie, he's been good. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think that he doesn't deserve most of the amount of praise that he's getting within the context of being a normal quarterback. I think he's just checked the ball. If you like him, if you're giving Mac Jones credit, you need to be giving Kirk Cousins credit. Because they do about the same things. Only Mac turns the ball over a little bit more. All right, we're going to roll with this. I need to screenshot this. And then let me make sure to get this so that I can have anonymous people on Twitter yell at me and tell me how wrong I am. It's my favorite thing to do. All right, here we go. Let me tweet this out right now while I got you guys. Screenshots. All right, this may be one of our quickers. All right. There we go. We are tweeted out. Let's see. Here's the thing. I think people have been on Twitter. I think people are just going off of the tiers and haven't been arguing about the rankings within the tiers. I don't know if they're just understanding that it's really hard to put teams in a specific order. But yeah, I think that's I think adding in the note that they are ranked inside of the tiers as well is definitely going to change how people react to that because they're going to have a lot more things. If it's just tiers, everybody's going to kind of agree on the tiers, except for, the teams floating around at the edge of tiers. It's rare that at this point that we're way off on anything. So, all right, it's been fun. We're going to call it a night on that. So, thank you guys so much for coming in, hanging out. Thanks for participating in chat. Hadzi, Money, let's see, Gabe, who else? Anybody else that I forgot? Hadzi, Gabe, Money. You guys were definitely the last few. Ginger, if you're still here, I know you're here earlier. Thanks so much. Can't thank you guys enough. So this is Tuesday night. Don't forget programming change. So instead of Thursday night, tomorrow night is going to be our weekly preview show. Normally we do it on Thursday night. We do a little bit of a side cast with Thursday Night Football. Got a little bit, 3 comments in 40 seconds. Huh, that's funny. So we typically do our preview show on Thursday nights. And this week, because of I've got baby shower stuff to prepare for, because our baby shower is this weekend. So I will be streaming tomorrow night for the preview show, which means I've got a lot of work to get done between now and then. Usually I have a couple days between Tuesday and Thursday. So Gabe, have fun with your family stuff. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I really, really do. It's gonna be a long week. It's already been a long week, and it's only Tuesday. So I need to get this stuff done for you guys so that I can get this out, and then it'll give me an extra day between Thursday and then Sunday pregame show, and that should be super, super helpful. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. Again, I will see you tomorrow night when we're back here, 7:00 preview show of all of the week 9 games. So at some point on Sunday, we'll be halfway through. So probably like 2:00, I think. Probably like 2:30 sometime on Sunday. We'll be halfway through the season. It's no longer halfway through after, a particular week. We're halfway through when we're halfway through week 9, since there's now 17 games. So again, thank you guys so much. Cannot appreciate you. Anybody that dropped a follow money, Hadzi, thank you guys so much. And with that, I'm gonna call it a night, guys. No fancy outro, no drops, no raids, no nothing tonight. I'm just gonna send you guys out. Thanks again for attending, for hanging out and the good conversation. Appreciate it.